But
Hi, everybody. Hey.
now that was the dry run. We're gonna start over now. All right, so Bill, just jump in whenever you get your video on, and
Well, I need the code to get on my laptop.
oh, you want me to
I
give
can
here? I'm gonna
turn my
put
video on the phone. I just need to get on the laptop.
here. I'll put it in the chat. That's the room code. There's no
Well,
password.
it's hard to see it on the it's hard to see it on the whatchamacallit. But hey, so I'm in St. Louis. You guys will see me during the tasting. So I've been a member since 2007. I was on a tasting panel when I was over there in 2015, and I think my favorite Society Lefroy is I think it's 29.128, deep, dark, and hugely entertaining. But I grabbed some of my favorite cherry Lefroy, so
Nice.
we'd have for the tasting. So, but
All
yeah,
right.
throw in the chat and I'll see if I can get on the laptop.
Yep. I'll put it in there
Cool.
again.
Thanks.
All right. So, and my name's James Walton. You guys all know me. My favorite is Tininic, or as we found recently, it's Tininich, I think. And any of the 1983 30 plus years are so good. Those are always my favorite. And I'm running low these days, but it's always been my favorite. But anyways, today, super excited. What I was telling people that first joined, we actually got the drams out to you guys really quickly, so you probably had 2 weeks to kind of sniff them and probably taste them already. But super excited about this. I've been talking to a few people here probably for the last like many months about today, and so I could not wait to get here with these drams, and then obviously share it with you all. These are all Sherry 29's. I think you guys remember when we talked about this event. We didn't mention Lefroy. I don't think we did. So if you knew what it was, you knew what it was. You don't have to be a member of society to belong here. This is not a sanctioned event. This is just a great time with friends. I told Alan, our host, a little bit about you guys, that we're a little bit more advanced to some degree. So we're not going to do like the whole slides and distillery and all that stuff. But it's just going to be a fun, interactive, few hours of time. Um, Alan Wood. I've met Alan when I first got into Scotch in Scotland, in Edinburgh at Queen Street. And it wasn't even about the whiskey. It was a time when it was like this cool idea that there's this whiskey club called Scotch Malt White Whiskey Society. And if you're visiting, you can't miss it. It's a townhouse. You got to go there, check it out, get dinner, whatever. So my girlfriend at the time, we went, and that was a time when I didn't know anything about whiskey. It was basically Lagavulin 16 was just some cool name that I would go pick off a shelf at a bar and then like try to suck it down the best I could without like, coughing up at like 43% or 40%, whatever it is. And then I go to the Queen Street, and it was a time when we didn't know what to expect. For those of you that have been there, you climb this tiny staircase all the way to the top. You go into this member room, and then it's a dark colored room, but there's like just tons of bottles all over, and you're just kind of like overwhelmed, but you don't even know what to say. Like, am I supposed to sit down? Am I supposed to ask? But the warmness of the staff, the warmness of Alan when I first met him was just so welcoming, so warm that we just had like the time of our life. Drank all this whiskey, blew my mind. I got shit faced. The next day was like one of the worst days ever. Um, but that was like the first moment I ever got into whiskey. And so I've been back many times. I've seen Alan in plenty of different places. But that was I always thought the essence of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is about sharing whiskey, meeting new people. A lot of us here kind of know each other by name, but now we're seeing each other by face. So that's why I think today was such a great time to do the society event with this guy right here. So Alan is all things SMWS ambassador, bartender, master spirits guy, really into cigars. Just someone that has what I think probably seen more SMWS bottles than anybody else, but also can take someone's thoughts about flavor profiles and actually find bottles that they would probably really like that matches that. And so there's a lot of history of the society that we're going to get into. There's a lot about these Sherry 29s we're going to get into. But I'd love to introduce our host, Mr. Alan Wood. Alan?
Oh yeah. Good afternoon and good evening and good morning to all you guys. I said my name's Alan. I've worked for Queen Street for about 5.5 years. I moved through to the Bath Street venue in Glasgow. I'm currently dialing in from Edinburgh. And for me, my absolute favorite society bottling was one of the ones we're trying tonight, 29.190. And there was a distillery, it was a bottling from Bunnahabhain called Pink Flamingos and Pipe Tobacco, and it was a port finish, and it was just ruby pink color, and it was a fantastic dram. And for me, I think one of the key things is I'm 32 years old. I've lived in Edinburgh all my life. I never knew about the society until one day a job opening came up at Queen Street, and I thought, oh, it'll be fun. I'll apply for that and see what happens. And 5.5 years later, I can't get enough of this stuff. So the first dram we're having is 29.88. And if you've ever come across any society bottlings, the tasting notes are just something out there. These are written by the guys in the tasting panel and everything, and they come up with some truly kind of interesting sort of notes and flavors. So your sort of tasting notes for this one is: first impressions were smoky barbecued pork, hot shellfish, beach dried seaweed, expensive balsamic vinegar, and rock pools on a hot summer's day. And then on the taste, we're going salty char, caramelized sweet cured bacon, and lots of smoke. One panelist was looking hot stones and charcoal with the addition of water, empty lobster pots, lemon wedges, boiled ham, lobster thermidor bubbling from the grill, jammy dodgers, old-fashioned cloth bandages, and caramel creamy Cullen skink. Clam chowder and salty fudge greeted us on the taste. Barbecued cod and king prawns mingled with more smoke. And this kind of typifies the society, what it's all about. These great big expansive tasting notes. And one of the reasons I've always loved sort of 29's and sherry 29's especially is just on the nose immediately. It just makes you sit down and think about it. And this one especially, the 29.88, it's an industry, it's a society legend. It was already a legend when I got there. It was something that we hadn't seen for a long time. And I've only been able to try really as far as 29.190 onwards. I've not tried the 158 or the 88. So this is the very first time I'm trying this as well. And on the nose immediately, it just,
I mean, he's got some bad weather, so he might freeze for a second here and there. But what a way to kick this off with this dram. Like, this nose is amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, you froze there, Alan, for like 2 seconds.
Sorry, yes, unfortunately, the weather is rather not conducive to internet and everything, but it's more whiskey drinking weather. But this here, the nose, like, I don't know if anybody else has anything to add or anything, but the nose is just, it's classic Lafroig for me. And I struggle with sherry casks. I usually go for bourbon casks with the exception of Isla, because at 9 years old and 60.9% ABV, you're looking
powerful.
Yeah, what a way to start off a tasting with a dram like this.
The Lafroig new make comes off the still at 63.5. So that's the percentage they put into cask. And immediately, I've had some 9-year-old peated whiskies that just claw your face off and throw it in the opposite direction kind of thing. The sherry still got that nice balance to it. It still kind of sits there. And for me, it's just kind of, it's a rather bizarre way of describing it, but it just makes me want to sit down in a big leather armchair, just filled with happiness. It's very well balanced. It's very meaty. It's very rich, but it's also got that signature Isla sort of style to it. And this kind of, it's a winter's dram for me. It's got a good bit of fire to it, good bit of pepper coming through from the sherry, but also as well, just on the nose alone, it's one of these glasses that I was telling James earlier is that there's sometimes we have people who leave the empty glasses on the table. And this is one of the things that I would probably do with this glass is once I'd finished it, because I wouldn't be able to help myself going back to it as well. And, you know, this does kind of come out the glass as well. And if I'm going to be honest, I'm just absolutely stumped for words, because it's just an absolute phenomenal little dram.
It is nice. Yeah.
And it's one of these, it's got these kind of wonderfully seaweedy notes to it as well. But there's nothing too kind of heavily salted. And I mean, what I always like doing when people come into the bars here that I work at, never read the society tasting notes. Always go blind and then read the tasting notes. Because for me, this reminds me of a barbecue I had many years ago.
Weird.
Very oily.
Oh yeah.
And it really is what's kind of got me started on Lafroig for the society, was this quarter cask, this kind of TCP Germalini style, but also
This
not
is
quite kind of
60.9%. I feel like the peat and the the sherry influences kind of brought it down where it's very much more palatable. I don't feel it's like a super strong in your face, smash mouth 9 year.
Nose is actually quite gentle. I couldn't detect much alcohol.
Yeah. And this was, oh yes, this was bottled roughly what, 2010, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just love it. This is really, and thank you, Alan, for I mentioned earlier dressing up for the occasion. You could have wore a t-shirt.
Oh, any excuse to wear a bit of tartan, me. Any excuse to wear a bit of tartan. Luckily enough, I'm not in my kilt, or I'd be zooming around the place like a madman.
So yeah, what does everyone else think? So I've sipped it. This is, I mean, again, a great way to start, and it's kind of funny because they're all going to be pretty high strength 29s, and so curious today about could we secure enough sherries, because even though they're all sherry 29s, they're all different years except for the last two. But I'm imagining they're all going to taste very different. I think, Alan, you said you've tried most of these, but I know this one is specific you haven't tried.
Yeah.
And for everyone else here, I bet you there's some of you that have tried most of these already as well.
I've actually had none of these before, so that's why I was excited.
Oh, wow.
So James, Alan, are they all? What kind of sherry? Is it all refill? Do we know anything about second,
This one,
first?
this one says refill, I think.
So everything apart from 29.260 is refill. So I would say probably with the color and the age, I'd say we're probably looking about third fill, because you're still getting that kind of sweetness coming through. There's still that kind of sort of Christmas cake kind of sherry influence.
The funny thing, though, is years ago, I remember it seemed like SMWS only released things in the casks they had them in initially. And then in the past couple of years, I don't know when that started, they've written like PX cask when it's only been for like the last year or two. But these are all full lives in the same cask, I'm assuming, because they're old enough.
Everything apart from 29.260 is just full maturation casks.
Okay.
And the finishing process for me is quite interesting because it's something we've only fairly recently gotten into. We've done, for example, 89.15, 89.14 are Lafroig sherry finished Tom and Tulls. And you get this kind of difference in flavor. And it really does kind of, for me, it benefits the malt massively. But at the same time, it's an interesting way of doing it as well, which is quite cool.
I got to pick up. They just finished. There was a number 4 finished in the 29.260. I got to pick that up. That was a stunning combo.
Yeah,
I think they just released. I got to pick that up. I think it's still in stock.
I remember when we had that released to us, and it was here today, gone tomorrow. And it's the same thing with the sherry 29s, and it's one of the reasons why I'm in awe that there is so much of this stuff to try, because when we have our outturns, it's usually there's certain numbers that just disappear off the bat, and 29 is one of them. And for me, that's why it's because I was chatting to a couple of my colleagues who are now in head office, who used to work the bar with me, and I was telling them the drams I was trying. And, without going too much into vulgarities, I was called a lot of names that weren't allowed to be pronounced in polite company.
The sherries are hard to find. I mean, I have an entire shelf of Lafroigs behind me. I have like 40 different single casks. And when James came to me for the sherry casks, I had like 3 or 4 out of the entire batch. So it's really, most of them are ex-bourbon.
Yeah, the next bottle we'll get to, Matt actually procured for us or got for us, so that's going to be fun.
Pulled it off the shelf, reached behind me.
Well, it's quite interesting when you mentioned being most of our Lafroig's ex-bourbon. The 29.1, the very first Lafroig we ever did, it it was a 6-year-old, and it was 58.6% ABV, and it was ex-bourbon. So this shift to sherry seems to have only really happened under the LVMH sort of Glenmorangie kind of ownership period, which is pretty cool, because you don't really tend to see approachable Lefroy's being done in sherry cask, which is really interesting for me, because a lot of these ones are very different styles. And
LVMH, oh, you mean LVMH?
sorry, Louis Vuitton,
You
Moet
guys.
Hennessy.
No, but I mean from you guys, but not, they never owned Lefroy. You're saying when they owned SMWS.
Yeah, when they owned, yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. I was confused. I was making sure, yeah. Because Lefroy going to Ardbeg, I was just clarifying.
Yeah, no, when Glenmorangie owned us, I think that's when we started seeing a lot of sherry casks coming through. And just to kind of give you guys a wee peek behind the Iron Curtain, if you will, we have actually an aim to produce more sherry casks. So we're talking to bodegas in Jerez. We've purchased Solera systems as well. So we've actually purchased full Solera systems for our sherry casks. So it should be pretty interesting in the next few years. I'm hoping to see some more sherry at Lefroy's, because yeah, just it's an absolute cracking flavor to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Some of the older ones don't even say. Like, I'm looking at my label of 2964, and I mean it looks like it's a sherry cask, but there's no mention on the label or these little notes, which get lost very frequently. It's a pain in the butt.
Well, those old bottles, yeah.
Is there a database for those old bottles to get some more notes about?
The two databases I would recommend, Whiskey Base is really good. Whiskey Base always has pretty up-to-date notes. Or what you can do is, I know we do have archives. We have archives of all the notes. So I think if you just give us an email, if you just email our membership services team, they might be able to help out as well. Or if there's any particular ones that you're after, I've put my email address further up in the chat. So just chuck me an email with the bottle number, and I'll see if I can go digging in places I shouldn't be looking.
Yeah, Whiskey Base is great for the modern bottles, but like the one that Will was holding up earlier, those older ones, it's hard to find a lot of the original tasting notes or the cask info, which is so prevalent, in the modern pours, in the modern bottles right now. Especially when you're looking at stuff on auction, you want to find out a little bit more what was going on with that bottle. A lot of people don't open those old bottles, or the ones that did get opened, they didn't write about it in modern review forums or Whiskey Base, so it's hard to have that. But I'm sure that's why I asked. I'm sure SMWS is wise enough to keep a strong database of their own.
We do.
You guys put your email back in the chat, because I joined later, so the chat doesn't refresh. But the one I'm looking for is 75.3.
Oh,
Whoa.
wow.
Because I talked to the society folks and they said they couldn't find anything. So
What's 75, Glenuri?
Glenroy Royale.
There is a website that I found before that had this spreadsheet of all these really old bottles, and it told you all the details. And it's a really old website that obviously was, from a long time ago. Someone might here knows it or finds it. I can't find it right now.
There's
It's a
Have you
spreadsheet.
tried using the
29's. It's called tin.org. Oh, you're not going to see it.
TIN.
If you go, tin.org, and I know I can't, it's like a whole spreadsheet from the first release to current. I don't know who maintains it.
Oh, yeah, here it
But
is.
it's the names, the years,
There
the
it is.
dates distilled, the type of barrel. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. I look at it all the time.
You knew what it was. I was like, somebody knows what it is here.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
That's awesome.
And Alan, so like a lot of times you meet people brand new to whiskey, and then you have the other group that, drinks it occasionally, casually, and then you have the group that are like really, into whiskey that show up. So where would you put this? Like if this was a dram on your shelf of the 900 bottles in Glasgow, is this a beginner's dram, or is this for someone on a little bit more special of a situation?
To be honest, where I would put this dram would be in my bag, and I'd take it home with me, and I would never let anybody else touch it. But I would say this is very much, it's a gateway malt to Islay. It's not got that heavy alcoholic percentage, because a lot of people's first interaction with cask strength, certainly mine was I tried something that was, I tried one of the society rums. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever tried any of our society rums, but you can essentially run a car on them sometimes.
Yeah,
I think the strongest we did was about 85% ABV. So I would say this one here is a really kind of classic example of because it's so drastically different from the Lafroig Select, the Lafroig 10, it's a classic example of it's quite close in age, but it's a different cask. So it's a really kind of good example of, right, 9 times out of 10, if you come into a bar, you've probably tried the Lafroig, a Lafroig 10, a Glenmorangie 10, or a Glenlivet or something like that. So this would be very much I know my flavor for Lafroig 10. Here's what happens when you put it in a sherry cask instead. And you won't find a Lafroig 10 being put in a sherry cask. So it's a good indicator of why we're a wee bit different as well.
That's why they just released the Break 10 Sherry cask.
Yeah. And I'll be buying a few of them, I'll tell you, when they come out, if they're any good.
Oh, they're good. They're in the States. They've been
Very
out for a
good.
while. They're very good. The new Lafroig 10 Cherry.
I like it a lot.
Maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was starting to dig into peated whiskey matured in sherry casks, I was hard pressed to find very many Lafroigs from sherry casks, unless it was like the 30-year-old old versions. So what me and some of my friends did was try to replicate heavily peated sherry whiskey by mixing some Lafroig 10 with Abudler Abuna. Kind of blended those two together, maybe 2/3 Lafroig and 1/3 Abudler Abuna, and that was the Lafroig 10 cask strength with the Abuna. So it was right about the 60-ish%, and it was like phenomenal.
Well, that's what I really like about it as well, is this kind of sort of society style and this spirit, definitely the 29.88. I was chatting to, I don't know if you've met if you've heard of one of our ambassadors, John McShane. He remembers it very well. And for me, I think this is a really good example of why we're a wee bit different. And I think it's a good way of starting off, because it's not so high percentage that your palate's going to go, oh, what are you doing to me? Because a lot of people, for me, the first mistake people make when they're drinking whiskey is they'll have the first sip of a peated whiskey and they'll go, oh no, don't like it. And that's because they're not expecting the burn. Whereas if you come into this knowing that if you drink a bottle of this, not that I'm advising you do, of course, you're going to wake up the next morning feeling like you've just shoved an ashtray down your mouth, which for me personally is quite a good experience because I'm ex-tobacconist, so dealt with cigars quite a bit. But for me, this is a real kind of sort of classic Islay malt, but it's also, I've always associated Islay sherry with Ardbeg, whereas this shows that some of the other distilleries can actually stand up on their own 2 feet with sherry as well. So for me, it's just one heck of a way to start with the Lafroigs, I would say.
I agree.
I had a talk with Simon Brooking about this a few years ago, how it seemed like Bowmore was the more flexible of the two, because it does really well with sherry, it does really well with bourbon, but Lafroig seemed to be more of a bourbon type of Islay whiskey, if you will. But there are the exceptions, and there are these exceptional sherry casks, which are fun.
Yeah, but also if you think about it, Bowmore, the peat is quite different from Lafroig or Ardbeg, right? It's like, it feels like Bowmore is much softer from a peat standpoint.
It's not as different as you'd think. I have to get the numbers. I don't know if you have them, Alan, but like, the 20 to 25 to 30 ppms or whatever. I think they're within a handful of each other.
I'm not talking about the ppm. I'm talking about the source of peat.
It's the same. They use the Port Ellen maltings.
They all use the same peat?
Yeah.
Not all of it, but about 75%, I would say, is from Port Ellen. Yeah.
It goes from it's the bogs, Castle Bog, which is one of the sort of biggest bogs on Islay. And what I found really interesting is peat's one of these sort of environmental hot topics at the moment. And peat's a carbon sink, so it pulls all the bad stuff out of the atmosphere. And there was a distillery in Speyside, I can't remember the name of it now, Cairn. And Cairn were experimenting with artificial peat, so essentially chemically recreating what peat does to barley. And the Scotch Whisky Association just lost their mind. So I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see some interesting stuff. And this is one of the reasons why, like Speyside, you've got hundreds of distilleries in Speyside. Highland, you've got hundreds of distilleries. Islay, you've got very few in a very small area, but they all use the same malting plant. They all use the same peat. They all use the same barley strain. And you're getting these different flavors coming through, which for me is really cool because you're getting different ppms, different parts per million for the phenols. Lafroig's coming in at 45 ppm. And for me, like each of these different Lafroigs, the ones that we're trying today as well, you've got all these different expressions, all these different kind of styles, flavors, tastes as well, which makes it really interesting as well, and just really kind of curious, to be honest.
This is wonderful. So, should we go to the next dram? And hopefully you guys saved some of this first one to hopefully come back to it as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell it's already
Oh,
kind of
God.
changing a little bit, which is nice. I just opened this a couple weeks ago to pour, and then I sealed it, and then the cork just broke. And so
Thanks.
it's been sitting in glass for, and Matt Lorner is, you're gonna zing me every time now I break a cork, because there's a better way to do it. I think he has figured out the best way to not break corks. But Alan, should we move on to the next?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and we'll progress on to 29.158.
And
Again, another one I've not had until today.
and Matt Lauren provided this bottle for us. And Matt, do you have the tasting notes? You be
Yeah,
willing?
yeah, I found them after you asked me for that, so I have them here. So it says it's initially a rich, soft, sweet peat smoke, followed by aromas of chestnuts roasting on an open fire, creme caramel, and caramelized brown sugar. Also noted was prosciutto, dry cured ham, and that of a well-used leather saddle, for those of you who taste saddles. The taste was that of hickory smoked almonds and cashew nuts, and a tussle between honey sweetness and peat smoke, like preparing for a smoked olfaction using a smoking gun. With water, it moved on to the fish market by the sea. It became tarry ropes, fish boxes, and salted codfish on the nose, flavors of peat smoked salmon and haddock, but probably not infused by a smoking gun. It's 14 years old. It's 61.7%.
Wow, this one is.
This is more powerful than the last one. Ooh.
I'm not getting as much peat on the nose on this.
I get more sherry. I definitely
Yeah.
get more sherry.
It says it's a soft peat smoke, so.
Definitely more alcohol.
Maybe a little sulfur. It smells like almost like a shooting range to me.
That's the smoking gun.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, have you had this already? Matt
I
Lauren?
have not. This is my first time as well. Yeah, you wanted one of the 5 that were closed, so there you go.
Yeah, so we were kind of like one bottle short of a Sherry 29. I asked Matt Lauren, he's like, I don't know, maybe I have it. Maybe I have one back there, and he pulls out like a whole box of them. And especially with the society, I know back in the earlier numbers, the ages were kind of all over. Like the last one was 9 years, this is 14. These days, there's a tendency with the 29s. There's a couple younger ones, but they're usually up in, the higher teens, if not the 20s, that we've been seeing lately.
I think that's really because a lot of the stuff we've had in the warehouse for a long time, and a lot of the stuff we've had in bond. One of my kind of sort of favorite things is that we used to get Ardbeg at practically for nothing when we were owned by Glenmorangie, and I think a lot of the island.
Uh-oh.
I think when it
And suspense is killing me.
Yeah, I mean, he had me hooked.
This
too.
is where he's telling the Springbank story, the other version.
this is the hey Alan, we lost you for a couple seconds.
Yeah, sorry. I suddenly realized my picture froze with me with my nose down a dram glass. I'm like, it could be worse. But I mean, with the
You said that they were
Lafroigs,
cheap when you got them from Glenmo, when it was owned by Glenmo. That's the last thing we heard.
so I mean, like with Ardbegs, we used to get them for next to nothing from from Glenmoe, and I think with Lafroigs, it's very much the same. I think we got them at a very reasonable price, and they just spent a lot of time in the warehouse. At the moment, we are sort of rebuilt, as with many other distilleries all across Scotland. We're getting guys coming back to us. I mean, we've been doing 18s, for example, Inchgowers, Glengarries. We've been doing them that we've not seen for 7, 8, 9 years. And I think what's really interesting is this style. I mean, comparing it back to the 9-year-old, this is just, it's a completely different spirit for me. If you put this in front of my nose and ask me to tell me what it is, I would say it's probably like a Lagavulin or something that's got that sort of thick, meaty, greasy. And there's definitely, I apologize, I can't remember who was saying it, but there's definitely that kind of cordite smoking gun kind of smell to it as well. And it's a very evocative whiskey for me because my grandfather used to go out shooting, and this reminds me of just smelling that kind of sort of gun cartridge. And it's really interesting.
Matt, when you read the tasting notes, I was smelling something like prosciutto, but it wasn't prosciutto. It took me like 30 seconds to realize that it reminded me of these jamón ibérico chips. I'm not sure if anybody has had them, but I actually found the link on Amazon. So take a look at this picture. It's like these chips that have been, I don't know, coated or whatnot in jamón ibérico.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of them so much. But then the palate is completely different.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. The Torres makes those really good truffle chips too.
They do. My wife loves them. I can't stand truffle.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. The olive oil is pretty good too. No, sidebar.
See, this is like I think this is very gentle. It kind of reminds me of what Prashant was saying earlier about the peat. I kind of know what you mean, Prashant, about the peat tasting a little bit different with Bowmore sometimes, just because the way it's integrated with the spirit, it kind of tastes different. With this
Yeah.
one on the nose, I would have guessed Bowmore on the nose a little bit, but then on the palate, it's powerful is probably the word that I'll describe. But this is what I want in a Lafroig for sure.
And there's that classic kind of big Isla note to it coming out the glass. And what's quite interesting from a kind of sort of technical perspective, Lafroig use 55-hour fermentation. So this produces very much fruitier compounds within the whiskey. And usually they kind of cut quite late, and this is what kind of brings the peatiness to the fore. And the society has done this a couple of times, and I couldn't say for certain, but we have talked to distilleries, and we have done what I would call, I don't know if this is necessarily a society term, but I would kind of call a spec malt, where we've given them kind of specific instructions on either cask or style of distillation, style of fermentation. And one of my kind of favorite stories about this is, it's not to do with Lafroig, it's to do with Glenmorangie, is we released, I think it must have been about 3 years ago now, we released a gin casked whiskey. So whiskey that had been finished off in a cask that had been used to mature gin. And it was unique. I wouldn't recommend it. It was unique. And we've also done, I think it was a Linkwood we did, where we finished it off in a Tabasco cask, which was,
Oh, wow.
I don't know if anybody's tried it. I think it was called The Last Drop, and we sort of repackaged it as kind of called it cooking whiskey. And just to go back to stories about breaking corks as well, we sorry to go off on a tangent here, just if this makes you feel any better. We did a tasting, there's the collection of whiskey called the 27 malts, where it's all these different smaller bottlings that have all these different illustrations on them. And we did a tasting with them. One of them was Dallas Dew. And Dallas Dew, of course, being insanely expensive and very difficult to find, I managed to break a cork into a bottle of Dallas Dew. Yeah, my manager wasn't very happy with me.
There is this instrument that many of us use when opening older bottles of whiskey. It's called no. It's fairly useful, and unless you're very familiar with using toothpicks, the 3 toothpick method, the Arno makes it really easy.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I like the trick that Bill Myers taught me, which I think James is alluding to, is that I don't close them all the way down. I leave like a quarter size gap between the cap and the bottle. And then you just push it really hard when you're going to open it. And that breaks the adhesions and heels on the side. That way, when you're pulling it out, it's not stuck and it doesn't break. So that seems to work. But if you're putting it back in a box, sometimes it won't fit. So that's the only downside of that one.
And it's also a little bit tricky when you are opening those older corks. You don't really want to twist it, but just wiggle it back and forth till you pull it out.
Right, but that's why if you push it in before you open it, it breaks the seals and then it comes right out.
Like push it in and turn it one rotation
Right.
around while it's still in the bottle, and then gradually. And if it's stuck, then you need to turn it over and get it wet.
Yeah.
And it's a very
Yeah.
but it's a kind of thing where it's easy in the beginning of the night, but probably more difficult at the end of the, for the same reason that I have a rule: I do not wash wine glasses the same night. I will rinse them and put them to the side, but I do not wash them because I've broken more stems on the wine glasses. So, Alan, is this the bottles you guys were talking about?
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
why they make
no.
stemless wine glasses, Bill.
Yeah, that was the ones there. Just I don't know if anybody's done this, but I've just gone back and I've sniffed dram number 1 after trying dram number 2. It's different flavors already, and it's one of these things where I really enjoy. It's my degrees in archaeology. I'm a professionally trained archaeologist. I have, whiskey training here and there, but for me, it's one of the reasons why I love the society, especially the 29's and the Isla whiskeys. They're so vigorous in the glass because this stuff is constantly changing, constantly evolving and growing. And going back and sniffing the 14 after smelling the 9, sort of jumping back and forth, it's a proper, for me, it makes me want to sit down and have a cigar, to be honest. It really is one of these great wee things.
And it's always
You really
bittersweet.
want to take your time with it.
Yeah, this was bottle 2014 or so, 2014, 2015, Matt Lauren. And so, yeah, I was going to say it's always bittersweet with these two because every time you try one of these 29s, you might not ever taste it again. That's the downside too, is they're just getting so hard to find, at least with the society. And then the newer stuff is very, it's quite different too.
And as we know, auction prices have gone up tremendously, especially over the last 2 years. So it's just costing more money to get them.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think so far? Matt
I
Ryan.
enjoyed it. I think it's a great whiskey. I'm very happy I bought it in the end.
And Matt
I
Ryan.
like them. I like them both. I mean, I actually was going to run downstairs and grab the new 10-year-old sherry because I had some on Thursday night, and I am getting some similarities from just having that the other day. So there is some type of consistency there with them.
Yeah, and Matt Lauren, this was your bottle. How does this stack up with? Was this what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, from the name, absolutely. The Smoking Gun. I'm definitely. I appreciate the name. Some of them I find very hokey, but this one appropriately.
The smoked old fashioned term in the note rang with me on the nose. I mean, I really felt that, but then it's got this. When I said powerful earlier, I feel like with really good Lafroig, after you swallow it through the palate and I breathe out my nose, the peat goes right out my nose. And that's like always the coolest feeling I've always had with peated whiskey. I always felt like, well, that's a real Isla whiskey. And this does it. The first one didn't do that as much, but this one definitely does.
And really, with some of these peated sherry whiskeys, from the sherry cask at least, right? You get different ranges of sulfur notes, and people usually get turned off immediately when you mention sulfur. But even within sulfur, it's like from a burnt matchstick or gunpowder up through rotten eggs. So it's a spectrum. It's not like just you detect sulfur, that means it's bad. No, but it's like on the first 30% of that spectrum, it actually makes the whiskey taste more meaty and savory, I think. But as it progresses more towards the higher end of the sulfur component, that's when it starts getting off tasting.
I'll jump in just because I brought up the sulfur note, and I completely agree with you. I brought up sulfur earlier, and then you might have seen my face like I was a little worried, but it's just because I smelt it right away, and I knew that I might have had to work with it a little more. Sometimes with the sulfur pours, I notice that they either need a little more airtime, a little more water, but I've had some of my favorite pours. I've had like a Brooklotti's famous for with like the Rivesaltes casks. All of them have just a slight tinge of that funk, that sulfur, that meaty note that you have. But when you work with it, sometimes they need a little extra work. Some really good pours need just a little extra time and work. They bring up, like you said, some of that really nice meaty notes, that beautiful undertones, that really the coal sort of peat really does emphasize those beautiful notes a little more. And this one definitely opened up a lot more. On that spectrum that you're talking about, it's still a little more on the burnt matchstick side that I prefer, but it's still a beautiful dram. Typical Lefroy salinity, oiliness, just beautiful.
And what I find really unique about it as well is if you were to give me a dram of, say, a Glenfarclas family cask, a wonderfully heavily sherried Speyside whiskey, I wouldn't thank you for it because I don't like these big kind of sweet notes. But with Islay whiskies, however, they have this just wonderfully, and I mean, I'm a man who likes his food, and for me, it's just like meaty kind of barbecue, and the sulfur, it's there, but it doesn't bother me. Whereas if I drink, like we had a heavily sherried finished Dalmore that we released a while back, Scottish Indian Summer, and 7 years old, sherry finish, and I opened it up, and I even remember trying the Eden Mill we did, and that was 3 years old, full maturation in a Oroloso cask. That was just like drinking rotten eggs. It was just far too sulfury for me. Whereas this here, it's just really, really well balanced. It's nice. You've got that little bit kind of sort of classic Lefroy kind of sort of, you're drinking Lefroy, but at the same time, there's not that sort of the sweetness to kill the malt. You can still sort of get the sense of the Lefroy whiskey and the Lefroy style coming through. Whereas with some sherries, that's why I'm such a big fan of like 96s when we do our own Glendronachs, is that we very rarely do Glendronach and sherry. We do it in bourbon instead. And this because you get the spirit coming through. And it's something that I think is very close. And it's very well done with the 29s, and especially the ones that we've got here. It's been an absolute trial not to actually open them all and drink them all before the tasting. But it's just super well balanced for me.
I'm in heaven. These are really good. Matt, Lauren, maybe any final thoughts? This is your bottle. You're getting it back with a few ounces. Well, actually, more than a few ounces. So if anybody wants to refill, talk to Matt. So Matt, any final?
Cork, that's the thing.
That's right. Any final thoughts on your bottle?
No, I thought it was good. I mean, Lefroy is a classic malt, and they make a great whiskey, and SNWS usually makes good casks with them. So I'm pleased. I'm worried though, Alan. I know that like different brands have dwindling numbers or different numbers. I know that for a while Ardbeg was low, but they've repleted. Springbank, I think, is still low. I heard Lefroy was getting to the lower end. I don't know what they're doing as far as independent bottles. I don't know if you want to comment on that or that's something for later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I know, like, for example, with the Society, Ardbeg was always something. Every Christmas you had an Ardbeg. That was just the rule. Every Christmas outturn, there was always an Ardbeg. Now that we're no longer part of the Glenmorangie family and getting access to Ardbeg casks, they're becoming harder and harder to find. With Lefroy's at the moment, I noticed when I first joined, there was almost a Lefroy every second month.
Yes.
And I'd never seen a Caolila. Now, however, there's a Caolila every month. We're getting Caolilas every month. And I know when
a US thing, because we used to get Caolila and Lefroy every alternating month, it seemed. That was the thing.
It's funny you mentioned that because I follow the SMWSA on Facebook as well. So when the American outturn gets released, I always have a look there to see what you guys get. And the amount of times I sit there and go, want. Why aren't we getting that? Why aren't we getting that? And I mean, even some of the bourbons and ryes and stuff like that as well. So the Society, I know, is investing and growing the sort of American sphere of influence as well. I think it's one of the biggest outside Europe. And there was, I suppose it's a wee bit of company inside here, but I know certainly there is, when we left LVMH, there was a period of time where we had casks set aside for the American market. So there is a lot of American exclusives that are going out, and the amount of times I see so much cool stuff that you guys are getting that I'm just kind of sitting there going, I want that. But again, I think we'll be seeing some Lefroy's coming soon. I think we will never see Lefroy completely die out. There will always be a demand for it, I think. And especially with 29 being such a integral number. And even you're seeing now, we're using old Lefroy casks that we have, and we're using it to finish off different whiskies as well. We released a Linkwood recently that was finished off in an Ardbeg cask. So again, I think there is always going to be this relationship. And I know certainly the next couple of years, the society is very much pushing towards sherry and peat, having more sherry whiskies, more peated whiskies. And I don't know what your guys' January out term was like, but ours, I've been with the company 5.5 years. January is traditionally, for me anyway, a much smaller release, bourbon casks, nothing too kind of fancy, just a wee kind of post-Christmas kind of out term. We had about 7 or 8 peated whiskies, which I've just never seen before in a January out term. So for me, that's kind of cool, is that there is this push to bring these whiskies and make sure we have a constant supply. And even with sherry casks, where Ewan Campbell, our spirits director, Kai Ivalo, another one of our spirits directors, they've been out to Jerez to visit bodegas. They've been out to America to visit cooperages for bourbon casks as well. So there is, I think, this drive within the society that if you were to buy a bottle of, say, 29.260, for example, you're lucky enough that you were, we would be able to tell you what casks were used, where the casks were from, where the oak was taken from, and give a really kind of big backstory to the whiskey. And that is kind of something that's coming in the pipeline, I think. But certainly it should be interesting anyway.
When you release the things in the Ardbeg cask, for example, the Linkwood that you mentioned, do you mention that somewhere in the notes?
Yes.
Like, does it say in a cask of 33? Does it
Yeah,
say in a cask of Ardbeg? What is it? I'm just curious how you do that.
It will always be the distillery number. We'll never mention distillery name. So that goes back to when we were first founded. So the whole reason we use codes was Pip didn't want to basically get done for trademarks. So it's why we use our coded system. And so I think it mentioned on the website, it was a cask number 33.137, I think.
Oh, it'll say what it was in exactly. Oh, that's great. Okay.
And you can go up and look at that as well. I know certainly the Tom and Tull we did, that was finished off in a Lefroy sherry cask, that was mentioned as a 29 sherry that was done for Feshila. So we are very transparent. And I know when we were just kind of dealing with the finishing, just to kind of jump ahead to 29.260, for example, we mentioned that it's a 19-year-old butt, an American Oloroso, finished off in first fill Spanish Oloroso. So we are kind of divulging that information, and we are making it more readily available as well. And for curious little employees like myself, I can go digging in places I shouldn't be looking to find information that I'm not allowed to see. So.
The other thing that was good was that I remember when the contract was dealt with between Glenmoe and the new owners, that part of the agreement was that they get a certain number of Ardbeg and Glenmoe casks in perpetuum. So that was nice. But
that's good.
unfortunately, yeah, there's always going to be Ardbeg, whether it's 6 casks or 12 casks a year or whatever it is. But and then Glenmoe as well. But the issue is, I heard like a lot of the brands that are now pulling out their independent bottles, it's trickier for you because you guys always get your bottles. Unless I'm mistaken, you always get the barrels straight from the distillery. You don't usually buy from brokers, so you have to have, it's not like you can fall back on the market and say, oh look, there's a lot of Lefroy out there. You buy them from Lefroy. So
we have done some. We have bought some casks from brokers. So they typically they've been casks of distilleries that are either closed or very difficult to source. But we don't tend to do that a lot. Our primary focus is going to distilleries. And there are some distilleries like Glenmory, for example, or Ardbeg, that we kind of can give a cask to, and they will fill with their spirits, and we take them to our warehouse. Whereas there's some other distilleries like
the old G&M days.
Oh, pardon?
Like the old G&M, Gordon MacPhail.
Oh, the old Gordon MacPhail.
Yeah, like the old G&M days.
GM always does that. They always give them the barrels. GM only does their own barrels.
Well, I put the link to the Linkwood that you're talking about, and that's the downside with these tastings. Let the bidding begin for those that are looking for it. But the good news is that what Alan told us is that expect more experimentation and other cool things. Obviously, you just have to move fast on those. And Alan shared his info. You guys can contact him if you're ever interested on, hey, what's the cool new stuff that's out there? What's hot? That's the cool thing is that you're at all the bars, so like you know what's hot. You know what people are saying. No, this is and it's flying off. Buy it now.
Yeah.
And we all look for it, at the outturn or at the auction. Shall we move on to the third dram?
Yeah.
So this one's what did we decide on now? 29.190, right?
Yeah, 29190.
So this
Still
was
numbered order.
Yep. It's like how chronological. Olaf provided this bottle. So Olaf, would you
Cheers, Olaf.
want to read us the flavor notes?
Or yeah, divine dark temptation. The air was heavy with a sweet, seductive smell from stepping out of the sultry summer sun into the cathedral-like warehouse of a sherry bodegas in San Lucar de Barrameda. Aromas of Hessian sacks and coconut husk next to cinder toffee and dark butterscotch mingled with a whiff of fresh sardines being roasted in the sea salt air from the nearby beach, irresistibly tantalizing. The taste was like a bellow, best described, of dry smoke, salty, dusty, dry nicotine tar, water added aroma of toasted coconut flavored hookah tobacco, and we tasted a bar of dark caramel and sea salt chocolate. Wicked.
Thank you, Olaf. I'm trying to when you were saying that this is like always a funny thing, and Alan and everybody wondering what you think. You ever notice the first time you read these, you're like, this is complete bullshit. But these ones are actually like pretty accurate. So as he's saying that, like I'm looking for coconut, and even like the color, it says, what is the color? Coconut.
I get that. I definitely get coconut.
Yeah.
What's the age
Yeah,
on
that
it?
was-
You usually get it on the older Lefroy.
There was one thing I happened to notice was even with the tasting notes, right? Like some of the older bottles were quite to the point, but some of the newer ones are a little more, let's
Expansive.
say, poetic.
I've heard some howling ones. I think the best ones I've heard for Isla whiskies were biting a fireman's glove, smelling a mermaid's armpit, and whiskey flavored roadkill. Now, I will try anything and everything once, but I don't think I've ever tried whiskey roadkill. But I've a funny story about this one actually. So 29.190, that was one of the first kind of old Lefroigs I tried when I first joined the society. And when I say tried, of course, staff training. And there was only about maybe 1.5 drams left in the bottle. And I sat down and I tried this, and this really kind of opened me up to
what
Once he
Alan
gets
fell off.
going, it cuts him off.
Yeah, just wait a few seconds.
63.5%. So the new make strength being 63.5, this being 58.1. There's been very little loss comparatively speaking. So this again is really interesting for me from that perspective.
Speaking of names, I think one of my favorite Bowmores, and also based on the name, is 3.173, which is the Earl O'Hell meets Nigella. And it's dark. It's like Coca-Cola. It's awesome. It's a 9-year-old first fill cherry butt.
Nice and salty, this one.
Yeah.
I really like the nose on this one, the 17 year.
Yeah.
Interesting is, for me, one of the flavor profiles the society utilizes is oily and coastal. And I struggle with defining what oily and coastal is. And this is really interesting. This is actually, I remember very vividly the first time I tried it. And I didn't get the same notes that I'm getting now. And what I find really kind of unique with Scottish whiskey as a whole is there's no salt compound within whiskey. They've put whiskey through mass spectrometers. They've broken whiskey down to its chemical compounds. They can't figure out where the salt comes from. And what makes this really interesting for me is it shows partly the power of marketing. 'Cause if you ever watch these kind of videos and marketing videos from distilleries, they will tell you that the cask sits at the sea being kissed by the salty waves of the Atlantic while being bathed in Isla smoke. And we've obviously taken ownership of this cask at some point. So we've taken it away, and our warehouse is situated about 40 minutes outside Glasgow. So I don't know if you guys know Glasgow, but there's not a drop of salt water anywhere near our warehouse. And the fact that it's still maintained that really kind of key Isla style to it has been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot about, I feel like tasting notes always are evocative of memories that are personal to each individual. So it's like if you lived by the coast at some point in your life, you know how salty air smells. You know when the air you breathe is heavy, you know what it feels like. So it's like it's one of those things that I think when you say coastal, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, I feel like this one's definitely more seaside than the other two. And
Yeah.
that's what I was saying when Olaf, and thanks again, Olaf, for sharing this. When you were reading that, I was like, this one is actually pretty spot on, in my opinion, from what you were saying. I really felt it really well.
So Talisker has that it's one of their official
Pepper.
bottlings. What's that?
They always have that pepperiness.
Yeah, so I'm sure most of the people here have maybe tried their dark and stormy, which is I don't know if we got any here in the States, but it's available somewhere. Right when this hit the palate, once I let it swish around a little, there was something about those notes that were just dark and stormy. You know, the coastal seawater salinity, but just full on with that Lefroy barbecue, sweet ham notes. That just hit me. For some reason, I always loved the name of that bottle. Talisker sort of markets their brand really well. Sitting on the water, everything is water based. Lefroy, they have similar notes, but like you said, this barrel probably aged in Glasgow, so it's completely meaningless most of the time. Most of the barrels are aged inland anyway, that they're marketing to be salinic or seaside coastal notes anyway. But this one, it definitely fights back with that saltiness, and just on the palate, it's ever going. The salted caramel note that I get is really nice, and it's one that tells a story that keeps going on. It changes throughout time. I'm about to add water and get that second sip, and I'm sure it's going to open up even more. It's going to be really nice.
Yeah, it's actually really good.
Who would have known if we drank, 5 Sherry 29's all about the same ABV that they'll taste so different? I mean, we went
Yeah,
from
it do taste very different.
very. This is the 17. For the history folks here, there was a few different iterations, and everybody correct me, but this was one of the first styles of label, and there's I think 2 versions of this at least
Yeah.
2, and then it went to this label here that we're on. But this 29.190 is actually, I keep calling it the metallic version. It's a different label than the older
Hold it
one.
up closer.
It's going to be hard to tell, but there's
It's a shinier label. It's
On the
shiny.
paper, yeah.
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 And
It's
so there was
almost like a plastic label, not paper. Yeah.
there was a shift somewhere along the 2010 area, 2012, something like that, and it shifted over. So I like to argue that there's 2 versions of that. And then now we're, I think, at least 2 versions past that too. So there's been a lot of iterations over the time.
Is there a reason? Like I said, I've never been an SMWS member, but is there a reason why they always stuck to the green bottles?
It's cheaper. It's got to be cheaper to stay with the
I
same.
know the
kind of
whole
bottle.
Isla story, why most of them stick to
It's,
green, but I
it's
don't
the
know why.
color issue as well. I mean, Will loves to talk about color, but the bottom line is if it's a society and you're supposed to go by the notes and you're blinded by the distillery, you're also blinded by the color to some extent.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's
So like I said, I know for a fact it's cheaper because they bottle thousands upon thousands a year, and it's cheaper just to produce the same type of bottle. And the only difference is the label and the cap color. Alan can probably further
Blends, though.
elaborate.
The blends though are clear, aren't they? I have some clear SMWS bottles, so.
Yeah.
So our kind of heresy project, our vatted malts, they're all in clear bottles to try and kind of push them aside from the single cask stuff. The single cask stuff, the reason we use green is color. Also as well, it's so green actually diffuses UV light. So if you do have, I mean, I have yet to encounter this problem because I don't have whiskey staying long enough. But if you leave whiskey for a certain amount of time, I'm sure as yourself, Matthew, you've probably experienced, the whiskey can change sometimes if it's in the sun. It can.
Oops. Yeah, no, I keep my curtain, I know he's paused, so I'll say it now, but I keep the curtains closed so there's no light on this cabinet. But I opened it for today, so.
I'm lucky enough to have a big basement to keep everything in, so no sunlight's getting to anything.
This is technically the basement. It's the smoking room, you know, it's got the chairs, the big TV, and about,
Above grade, that's not a basement.
you know, it's below, no, it's below. If you go to the
No, you
driveway.
can walk right out into the backyard. You're above grade.
That's true, all
I'm the
right,
real estate guy, trust me.
all right.
We really lost Alan.
Yeah, he'll be back. The first 30 minutes or so, we joined early to catch up on stuff. It didn't pause at once, but now it just keeps going. So he'll probably reboot.
Yeah, the UK just has bad Wi-Fi. I mean, it's just one of those things. Whenever I go there, it's the
Dropped
same
off.
thing.
He'll join back. Going back to nose, the first two, they smell kind of like dirty socks. They're like, I'm getting a lot of funkiness is coming out. I don't know if anyone feels the same way, but
It's
Maybe
empty
it's homo.
glass.
That's
I get
homo.
in. 'Cause
Oh, if you want to smell dirty socks, you got to try some Baiju if you've never had it.
oh, I did. I'll never go back to that. You should do it once, but after that, it's.
Put that in your link, James.
Actually, I find that most Bowmores, if they're over 30, have this kind of like locker room funk. Like you're no longer nose blind because it's after spring break and now you come back to school and head in that locker room for the first time. You're like, ooh, you know, all the socks and stuff have been seeping for 2 weeks and you're no longer nose blind and it hits you. But I get that with older Bowmores over 30.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that too. I agree.
Yeah.
I like it, but
Oh, it's not bad. It just, you know, try telling that to somebody and then in the same sentence say you like it. So
yeah.
That's like
Amanda,
Robert
You're in the right
Kennedy
crowd
note.
for that.
Yeah,
True.
some people look out for that, man. Yeah, definitely.
Amanda, what do you
Well,
think so far?
Oh, I think this is great. I've enjoyed all of them a lot so far.
Do you drink peat usually? You've been, I think, been to all of our tastings so far. I think,
Possibly.
but this is the first. This is the first real peated one. The other ones had like a little bit of peat, but this one is straight up peat.
Yeah, I until I started to be more active in the group, I pretty much really exclusively drink. peat.
Oh. Who's that, Harold?
Oh,
This is the thing. Sorry, Amanda. Sorry to cut you
oh no,
off.
you're good.
My wee bairn. He was crawling by. He wanted to say hi.
Is this the reason you don't post much anymore, is it?
Basically, and lack of sleep, which again falls to him. Say hi.
Harold, can I say the funny story I always joke with about you?
Me, yeah, how I used to say I'd never come around.
He's like, she's about to give birth. You guys aren't going to see me again for a while. So let's make it. And then as soon as the baby is born, we see him like all the time. Can't get rid of him. He's like here. It's like,
Well, she's standing in earshot, but I have to thank her for watching this little guy while I do go out. Okay, you can't have the whiskey. Sorry. There you go.
Alan just messaged me. He said he's reconnecting.
Hey, I was gonna ask the people that are familiar with, you know, the society and whatnot. You were talking about the different types of labels, right, James? What, you know, I have 2 Colilas here that have a box, you know, old balls collection, Carpe Diem and the Let the Tempest en Blanc. What's the deal with those? Why do they have a box? You know, what's the old Vols collection, and does anybody know about that?
So they can charge more money because they're
Show a
older.
picture
Yeah, I
of it.
know that.
Which one are you talking about? You have can you show it up or is it close by? Or?
Bill, it's the Carpe Diem. Old and
Carpe
dignified.
Diem and 308. Golila 53308. They're in the other room. My wife's there.
Hold on.
That was a good one, Carpe Diem. Really nice.
And we can ask Alan as well, because he'll talk about the initial vaults collection. He was talking about it earlier a little bit about the Rose Bank and the Macallan and the Spring Lafroig, and then there's a Spring
Oh.
Bank.
Oh, you like
Oh,
like the
look.
black labels.
Yeah.
No, but
Yes,
they come with
yes,
the
yes.
box.
Those
They
are
have
for
all
25 and
traditional.
older, yeah. Or
Well,
now.
some come with a
it's-
box, but the society does all kinds of weird stuff.
William, that's a really good one he just showed. That's an excellent one.
29,249.
Yes, that's a great one. Really fantastic one.
Awesome. Here, wait. I got some weird society stuff.
But Peter, they were supposed to be like the best of the best, like the ultra premium, and that was maybe 4 years. Someone correct me, 4 years ago, maybe was the first 4 or 5 years. It was like the first batch.
But by nature, you'd say they're also more longer aged, right?
Oh, they're always
well,
older. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Matt, Ryan, didn't you just get the other one? There's a new Vaults 29.
I just got that one. Yeah.
So this was done to celebrate the 18th anniversary of the society. So it came in a little box, and it's a 500 ml.
Is that Longmorn?
This is no Glen Grant 9.30. Oh wait, no. Is 9 Glen Grant?
9's Glen Grant.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Did you guys see that cooking whiskey that Alan was talking about?
Oh, that's crazy.
Well,
All I
when he
know is
comes
I'm
back-
having a Bolivar with my Lafroy because that's how you're supposed to smoke them. So
man, it would have been nice to do this with cigars and when the weather's nicer too.
it's
I
perfect
agree.
weather for whiskey. Richard said this as
can't
well.
smoke a
It's
cigar in my
It's a
house.
Lafroy day, you know.
Very Lafroig day. I think Matt, you got hit out in Long Island a lot worse than the city. The city doesn't seem that bad, really. The roads are all clear today.
I thought I made a genius effort. I didn't want to dig out of the snow yesterday morning. So I took an Uber to work. I got there on time. It cost me $10. Didn't want to dig out again after the shift. I had to wait 40 minutes after my shift to get one to go home. And I got home, like my car was fine. I could have just driven, but you know, whatever. The backyard's buried. My friend in Buffalo had a great Facebook post. He has this huge driveway, and he's offering a free course on shoveling for kids who want to start doing it as a business to practice at his place. You know, bring your own shovel, bring your own wheelbarrow. I thought that was a great quote. Yeah,
That's funny.
These kids rang my doorbell yesterday. I said no thank. They got my neighbor for $80. I said 20 years ago I was charging $10 a house. You're getting $80 a house. You could, you know how many bottles you can get for that? I was about to start ringing doorbells.
you can get the same. You can get the same number of Macallan as you used to.
Exactly.
Well, let's pour the next one. He says he just rebooted his router. Olaf, thank you for sharing this awesome bottle. Any last thoughts?
My pleasure sharing it.
It's beautiful for 17. I thought it was older.
You'll just like Matt Lauren, you'll get some ounces back. So if anybody wants refills, talk to Olaf. It's not up to me. It's already sealed. It's ready to go. All right. So the next one is 29.260, and this one's obviously a lot darker. I got this in the Society Bar in London.
And I'm surprised for such a high amount of number. You don't see them much at auction. For such a high number, normally you would see a lot more of these at auction.
Yeah, how many do you know? Oh, 507 bottles. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the one I was looking forward to tasting the most.
Me too.
Just because I've heard a lot about it and I just never have.
Hey, sorry, James. Are we at 260 or
Yeah,
277?
260.
Okay, 260.
And I'll hold it up if you guys can see it. This one has the very nice drawing for facial. It has a flamenco dancer, I believe. and to promote the Spanish sherry cask. And it's called a visceral elemental experience. Alan was supposed to read the tasting notes, but if he doesn't come back on anytime soon, I'll read it. But and this is also the tasting flavor profile for this is kind of like a taupe or mauve. Does anybody know what this flavor profile is supposed to be?
Old and Dignified, I think they had it under, actually.
Yeah, because the Old and Dignified is definitely this color, as you guys know, this like magenta purple. So maybe it was just the printing didn't come through.
That's interesting.
It's very different. It's more of an orange.
I can't keep up on the little colored things on the caps.
All right, so tasting note. The nose, syrup of figs, prunes, moist gingerbread, custard tart, licorice, all sorts, which I believe is some sort of like European or Scottish or English candy, cigars and bodegas, and boots of Spanish leather. The palate is cough syrup, ash, burnt wood, dark honey, dried orange peel, sugary espresso dregs, poached pears with cloves and kippers soaked in PX. With water, the nose finds malt loaf, stem ginger, maple pecan pastry, muscovado, creosote, exotic pipe tobacco, and burnt prawn shells. The palate now has bottled Guinness, Amareno cherries, and burnt raisins in a cake. Quite a dram, a visceral elemental experience. 16 years in American oak Oloroso butt, then into a first fill Spanish oak Oloroso butt for the final 3 years. I think 3 years is quite a bit of time for a finish.
This is the 260, right?
260. Yep, this is the darker one.
I think in 3 years they call it a second maturation.
Oh, really? There you go.
2 years is a finish.
Yeah.
Anything more than that's a second maturation.
That's a great debate, and someone needs to have it.
That's the thing that if you see some of the older Springbank releases, it'll say like 6 years in this thing and 8 years in this thing. It's like, dude, 8 years is not a finish. 8 years is a secondary maturation.
Yeah,
Well,
It's a single cask.
3 years makes you a whiskey, so 3 years in a finish is a second maturation. So
that makes a lot of sense.
That's a good argument. I like that argument.
that's the easiest way I think of it.
Yeah.
I remember the Whiskey Exchange released Kalila a few years ago. I have to look it up. It was like 7 years bourbon, then it was 7 years in a muscatel, and then the last 7 years it was in an Oloroso sherry cask. So it was like 3 full long-term, like a triple finish, triple maturation or whatever you want to call it.
Triple matured.
See, Alan's back. Welcome back, Alan.
Sorry about that, guys. The weather's a wee bit windy here, so I had to go on full on climbing around the house, trying to find routers and resetting it and hitting it with large hammers and everything.
No worries, no worries. You're not getting, I think you already know this, you're not getting paid for this, so you don't worry. We finished the 190, and so we moved on from that. We poured the 260, and because you weren't here, I read the tasting notes, and so I just posted them here. And I don't think anyone sipped it. Maybe someone has, but we just started nosing literally when you just joined back.
This one looks dark as coffee.
Yeah, it's the darkest one.
Very dark.
So this is your double sherry as well. And what I find really interesting with this one is everybody always assumes with sherry casks, they're made using European oak, but this is actually made using American oak. And American oak is chemically very interesting because American oak has high concentrations of vanillin, or vanilla is why we use it for bourbon distilling and bourbon maturing. Yeah. But it's been finished off in European, so you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. And I mean, the color alone, they're both, I think the first one is refill, but you're still getting a wee bit kind of sort of classic Oloroso coming off the palate, but also as well, for me, it's just, and this was done for our Feshula release. That's why we've got a pretty funky label for it. And we've always been Fuck, have I frozen again?
There you go.
Oh, we got you.
Oh, this internet connection is going to make me drink a bottle of whiskey after this. So if you guys do ever get a chance to go to Isla and go visit Feshila, go visit Isla House. So Isla House is what we term as a partner bar. And we have partner bars all across the world, and we have no financial interest in these partner bars. They just carry our things. And there's one in DC as well.
Jack
We've
Rose.
got them kind of
Jack Rose.
oh, the Jack Rose is a beautiful place. I didn't get a chance to go, but unfortunately, well, I do want to get over there and see what that's all about as well.
Oh, it's a fantastic
House,
place.
partner
It's a
bars.
fantastic bar. If you ever come to the US once again, Jack Rose is definitely a pit stop that you have to plan.
But I mean, it's maybe the company might get me over there for a bit of staff training and a bit of wandering around anyway. But this one for me it's kind of, I always try not to judge a whiskey based on its color, but the color alone for me, that just speaks to proper armchair kind of easygoing. And this shows you as well, I believe the flavor profile is sort of light orange, which is deep, rich, dried fruits. So it shows you again that the flavor profiles for the society. When I was brought in under, when we were still using the older labels with no flavor profiles. And the flavor profiles are a way of kind of, for new members, new customers to kind of get a sort of associated with the whiskey. And the deep, rich, dried fruits is not something you commonly associate with these kind of peated distilleries, but this really has that kind of sort of Christmas cake. And just going back to sort of evocative drams, this for me is a very evocative dram because this has that kind of, I'm trying to think, you guys have pheasants in the States?
Yes.
Yeah, basically it's like kind of sort of smoked pheasant with a wee bit of venison thrown on top. And it's just got that really kind of sort of nice gamey kind of sort of bit lean meat to it, but also very sweet at the same time.
I think the best thing so far is that we are having so many sherry 29s, but they are so very different, each one. I think that's the most interesting part.
Yeah.
And that Oloroso brings that peat down. Is what you usually see in, what is it, the 25-year plus Islas where the peat starts to die down a little bit. But with the younger ones, the Oloroso definitely, balances it. And Harold brought a Glen Scotia the other day to Matt's house, and it was heavily peated, but Oloroso. And it was like, this is not heavily peated. I mean, sure it was scientifically, but it didn't blow your mind away, or didn't blow your mouth away with peat. It was just very balanced, which is really interesting. This one feels this is 19 years old. I mean, it feels probably about right, but you might even guess it's a little bit older. I mean, it's really soft. I mean, that peat is much more gentler in my opinion.
I'd love to know about the Oloroso cask, like if it was an older cask, because I'm guessing like the American maturation was used in a younger cask, sherry seasoned barrel, but I feel like the Oloroso finish comes from a much older barrel. I wonder if it was like a first or a second fill from an older Oloroso cask that they had, because you're getting a lot of those older like leather
Spanish
chair.
oak.
What's that?
It's also Spanish oak.
Yeah, the Spanish oak, but you're getting, for me, it's not like the newer Spanish oak stuff that you're getting. Like he said, he gets a lot of like Christmas spice. With Oloroso, I get like nutty spice, French vanilla sort of notes. But this one, I'm getting more of those older, not like rancio notes, not like the Bunnahabhain has like with the what's that the seasoning that they used to use with the old sherry cask.
Oh, Paxarate.
Paxarate, yeah, I'm not getting Paxarate on that, but it's still got that older, distinct woodier sherry note that I'm getting from it. I feel like it wasn't a fresh, it wasn't one of the newer Oloroso casks. I would guess that it was maybe an older cask that they used for the finish.
I suspect, I mean, knowing kind of our links and knowing our heritage, I would suspect this is probably an Oloroso Spanish. This has probably been finished at our warehouse, I would say in Hillington, near Glasgow. And I would say as well, given our heritage and our connection with Glenmorangie and their predilection towards sherry casks and everything, I think this is probably one of the Glenmorangie sherry casks that we had kind of as a tide over from when we left the company, because this will be about the same time that we really, as you can see with the change in labeling, we really started establishing ourselves as a separate independent entity. And at this point in time, we weren't owned by Artisanal Spirits. We were owned by a private equity firm known as Inverleith Partnership. So this was kind of the sort of in-between point where we didn't go fully Artisanal Spirits, but we were only on the sort of Inverleith Partnership. So we were, what was interesting for me is when we left Glenmoe, we took a lot of kind of the higher staff with us as well. And this is kind of one of these things where I think this is a cask that bridges the gap between the two styles. And for me, I think, certainly only a humble opinion, of course, is that I think the sort of initial expression of this, the 29, is probably been a 29 that we've had under the Glenmorangie kind of days. And this has been finished off in because this is one of the really kind of first times we experimented with the finishing process. And our finishes usually are about 6 months to a year. There's been a few that we've played around with the time scale and everything. But so this one, I think if I remember correctly, I think it was about a 9-month finish in the Spanish Oloroso. But you definitely, for me, it's just got that wonderful kind of, it just, I mean, excuse the slight lack of professionalism here when describing it, but it just makes me just go, nom, nom. Just, it really just, it makes me happy. And it's very difficult for me to put a finger on why it makes me happy, but this whiskey just makes me happy.
James, you said this was a 3-year finish, right?
Yeah, it was re-racked and it was put into Spanish Oloroso for 3 years, I believe,
3 years?
or 2 to 3 years. I mean, so 16 years, give or take some months. American Oak Oloroso, and then it was refill American Oloroso, and then it says the official note says finished. But Matt Lauren brought up a good point. It's a, a second marriage or what, second maturation. But yeah, then it was, you know, let's say 2 to 3 years in a first fill Spanish Oak Oloroso bud. But I know what you mean, Al. Like this is like, you know, like the sweet receptors, I believe, are in the back of your tongue. But when I sip this, the sweetness is just like blows up. Like it's a little bit, it's very fast. And then again, like you taste all these different, like wonderful, like someone's a Christmas cake, tobacco. I feel like all those things that you're getting with sherry. And then that Lafroig is still there. Like it's a little, like that little bit of saltiness. And then the peat is just a very, again, for my palate, at least, maybe it's because this is the third or fourth one, it's a little gentler. But this is like a smooth, like end of the night dram. You know, when you're having dinner, like this is it.
And I mean, what's interesting for me as well is like I've so I went out to the shop today and I got the Lafroig Select, just the very basic stuff, and I've had just a tiny wee bit sitting off to the side. And every time I've tried the Society stuff, I've gone back and sniffed that to see how the kind of almost base spirit and what we do to it, because again, the Lafroig Select, it's a non-age statement, so it's a collection of different ages. And it's really interesting that this is probably one of the first times in my 5.5-year term with the Society that I've been fortunate enough, with the sort of quality unavailable, and just to extend my thank you once again to everybody that's allowed just a humble ambassador here to try some truly phenomenal stuff. But it's interesting to see how this kind of base spirit comes through. And Lafroig for me has always been very dear to me, and this is a proper armchair dram. This
one for me is more complex than the others. I mean, definitely on the palate, I get kind of successive waves of flavors, more so than the others. And there's some tannins in there, which is really nice. I don't know if anybody else gets that. And I get a tiny bit of ash at the end. So you're right that, James, that the peat is kind of subdued, but it says hello just as the last drops are disappearing down your throat.
We didn't get this one in the US for facial, which is kind of sad. But yeah, Richard, I know what you mean. I love when there's some tannin in there. Like that's calls my name at least. And this definitely has a little bit of that. Matt Ryan, what do you think? This was one that you were looking forward to. I think you're still searching for a bottle, if I'm correct. What do you think? Has this exceeded your expectations, or was it pretty much spot on with what you thought?
I like it a lot. It wasn't what I was expecting. I actually like the first two a little bit more than this one. So I'm actually kind of glad I didn't just spend $900 for a bottle. So I'll probably still get one because you know how I am. I'm like Pokemon, I gotta have them all. But yeah, I like it, but I think I like the older two a little bit more.
Very nice. Um, Before I move on, I guess I could tell you guys how I got this bottle. I was in London right around Face Shield 2019, and I went to the Greville Street, and the nice bartender mentioned, "Hey, tomorrow's Face Shield. If you want the bottles that are coming out, you got to come tomorrow at so and so. I think it's like 10 a.m. or something like that. There's gonna be a line out the door. Make sure you whatever." So I was like, "Cool," because in my mind, like, there's a lot of people here. I don't know everybody, but we secure bottles in very weird ways. Like, there's customs people all over the world that know us by name. Like, it's just there's a network, right? And so he's like, "Yeah, this guy's never gonna show up again." But in my mind, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be here like an hour and a half early, right?" So I drag my poor girlfriend. We go to this restaurant right on the corner. If you guys know what I'm talking about, there's a restaurant, the really old Hart's restaurant bar, and then it's right next door to that down this alley. And so I get there like an hour early. There's like nobody there. And then so I'm like, "All right, let's go get breakfast and I'll keep an eye out the window. Once one person gets in line, I'll be the second," and so on. And so nobody ever shows up. And so it's like 10 minutes before, I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna go." And then by the time I walked out, there was a group of older gentlemen that came in. That there was like 4 of them. So I was like, "Crap, maybe I'm like the 5th or whatever." I go upstairs, and then I'm sitting there patiently waiting. This is like they're still counting money for the till. Like, they're not open. They're just like, they let us in, but they're just like, and so then I'm like patiently waiting. I'm kind of like, I'm here for one reason. I'm not here to like. But those other the other group came there to drink. They weren't even there to buy a bottle. So then I'm like, "Hey, I'm here for the bottle." They had this bottle. This was the only one they had to sell. The other ones were like earmarked for people, whatever. So if I hadn't done that, like, I wouldn't have got it. And then he sold it to me right after I bought that. Tons of people came in, and then everything was gone. Like, at that point, everything was up. And then I go to the other London bar later that day, the old one that's closed, if you guys remember. And the other bottle that they had, which was the Matt Ryan, help me. It was the
This is the one with the dentist.
That was the Bessie throttle of the Bessie throttles a kipper.
I
Is the
go
one you're
there.
talking about.
Yeah, I go there. It wasn't the same day. It was like a couple days later after the Face Shield kickoff. It was a couple days later. They must have had like 13 on the shelf. They would only sell me one, but they just had nobody was buying them at that. They ended up closing that bar down, but they had just like tons. And that's where they also had the Rose Bank. They had all the meeting an old master, McAllen. They had everything there. They had like every bottle I don't know, Alan, but they had like every big SMWS bottle. And this was about 2 years ago. It's all gone now, but like nobody was going there. So they had every single hot bottle. And so like a few grand later, I walk out the door trying like every single big whiskey there. But that's how this bottle got to be about. Like, otherwise we couldn't have got it. But I know a lot of us here, we all share stuff, but we also have these crazy stories about how we procure bottles, and sometimes it's like really, really
In
obscure.
2019, I should have a couple of them in the back. So, because I was there at the Isla House when they did the tasting. So,
oh, nice, nice.
Well, it's quite funny you mentioned about that. So we had 2 public bars in London, in Devonshire Square and Northcote Road. And so we actually have that for drams behind the bar at Glasgow, because when Glasgow was first being opened, we got a lot of what we term as archival stock. So we got pretty much all of the stock that had been earmarked for Northcote and Devonshire Square. So we had that bottle on the bar for drams on our opening night. And we, I think we sold out of that by dram in about 2 hours. And that just shows you as well, for me, and that's what I really like about it, is for me at the society, we're more focused on getting stuff on the bar, making sure people have cool stuff to try, but also our shops we have second to none stock at Glasgow, I would say. And at Queen Street, we always had good stock, but at Glasgow, and this is what I love about the society, is that there's stuff that I'm coming back to that I was like, oh yeah, I tried that like 3-4 years ago. And with the Fishila releases as well, I think it was Amanda that mentioned about her favorite bottling being the Bunnahabhain, the smoked salmon fish jerky. And that was our very first kind of small batch we did for Fishila. And the small batch, we just batted a couple of casks together from what I quite like about that is that was in direct response to member feedback, where they were saying that we couldn't get enough of this Fashila stuff. So this is one of the reasons why this smoked salmon jerky came to be. And I think it's a great thing now as well, is that we're still producing these whiskies. I mean, 29s, 3s, 10s, 53s, they're all very intrinsically tied with the kind of Isla and the whole kind of sort of society notion. But at the same time, we're looking at ways to ensure that we have stock and we have allocation for it. My favorite kind of statistic for the society is if we stopped purchasing casks today, we have enough to supply our worldwide market for the next 10 years. So we have enough casks to do different releases for the next 10 years. And what I quite like about it as well is we've just acquired a new warehouse out in Uddingston, and the site is huge. So there's going to be some cool stuff coming. Certainly, there's going to be some really interesting stuff coming. I'd like to see some guys come back. We've not done a Kilcoman for a while. We've not done Lagavulin for a long time.
Forever. 93, I think, was the last one.
Yeah, Talisker is another one.
Yeah. Oh, the amount of times I get asked for Talisker is quite funny. It's the same as Talisker and Balvenie. We just don't tend to see a lot of them. But I think now that we're independent, I think as well is that we're quite unique because we don't tell you what you're drinking. We use our codes. That I think, for example, with like 29, I don't think we'll ever see 29, he says, hopefully, disappear off into the sunset. You know, I think we will see these different distilleries just grow and grow and grow with us. And certainly we will kind of see a growth and explosion of different styles, different flavors, and I think different casks as well. So, I mean, we've done everything apart from essentially a mezcal cask with the society. So should be interesting to see what happens in the next few years, I would say.
Have you had any good mezcal casks in general?
We have done, the Scotch whisky industry has done one mezcal cask to my knowledge, which is the Grant's blend. So they did that, but I don't know at the moment because the SWA
Lagavulin just did it.
No, there's been a few. I'm asking if he's liked any of them, because I always feel like the mezcal is flat. Like there's not enough going on with the cask, and there's like not enough smoke and not enough, like I feel like in mezcal in general, you don't get those like really ultra sweet agave notes that I feel like not everyone does like, but I haven't had any of that come through on any mezcal cask. There was a Blurathol North Star that I tried also.
I honestly haven't tried many mezcal casks. It's the unfortunate side effect is I have not tried very much mezcal itself because, I mean, much like with bourbon and with rye, I've not tried very many of them because a good bottle of bourbon in the States, I mean, I'm sure as you guys will know, will not be that expensive. Whereas a good bottle of bourbon here will be 3, 4, 5 times what you would pay in the States. And for me, I think it's one of these interesting things because we just did an Applejack cask rye whiskey from Finger Lakes, I think, and it was phenomenal, absolutely amazing. And I'd never really had much experience with that kind of stuff. And that's why I particularly like the sort of 29s as well, is that the people come in and they ask for certain things, and a lot of people come in and they'll ask to try a peated whiskey of some description, or they'll ask to try, you know, something like this. And with the society, because we have this almost flexible nature where we can go right here, have a try this. And one of my favorite stories with distillery number 29, the Rise, and all these different things was we had somebody come in and sat down at the bar and said, right, I'd like to try a peated whiskey. And I said, well, what have you tried before? And I said, well, I was at a house party many years ago and I drank a bottle of Lefroy and I've hated peated whiskey ever since. So I want to get back into it. And that's much the same way as I got introduced to Lefroy, because I was 18 and I got into my dad's drink cabinet, and needless to say, about a bottle later, I woke up feeling very sorry for myself and swore off the stuff. And now, of course, I've come back to it and I can't stop talking about it. But so I got him to try this 29. I didn't tell him what it was, just put it down in front of him. Here, try this, see what you think. And showed him what the bottle was afterwards, asked him what the code was. I said it was 29. And he said, and this is what I find so phenomenal with all these different, and the point has been made as well, all these different Lefroigs so far have been intrinsically incredibly different. Even though you're dealing with the same base spirit, the same base barley, the same base water, And this is what I find so exciting about the society. And this is why 5.5 years later, they've not been able to get rid of me, you know, is that each whiskey we do is different from the last. And there are a lot of other people that do independent bottlings, do single casks, but they tell you what to expect. And I've known that I'm drinking Lafroig tonight, for example, but at the same time, each one I've gone, that doesn't smell like Lafroig, or that doesn't, you know, kick me in the face kind of thing. So, you know, for me, it's one of these great things where it's a really unique, and also as well, is that the first two as well, the 0.158 and 0.88, I've never tried them before. So that was literally the first time I've tried them tonight. And I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've had that experience of I'm trying a whiskey for the first time and I don't know what to expect. And it's one of these great things where the society, because it's constantly doing these new things with these spirits as well, is that we're doing some interesting stuff. We've got our society casks on the bar and stuff like that as well. And I think the next 5 to 10 years for the society is going to be really interesting, because we're looking at getting a warehouse established in the States. We're looking at getting a warehouse in Europe because, I mean, I don't want to say the B word, but Brexit has made our European dealings a little more challenging than it needs to be. So
Lost it there for a second. He'll come back.
I've been fortunate enough to try some of the JG Thompson stuff as well, which is kind of the stuff that's done by artisanal that's not linked to us. And it's, yeah, just going to get interesting and more unusual the more we go forward. Sales pitch over.
I think that spurred, like, I got a bunch of questions for you on that. But can we move to the fifth? Is it the fifth? Yeah, the fifth. The what is it? 29.277. Holy smoke. And Matt Ryan produced this bottle for us. Thank you, Matt Ryan. Would you be willing to share the tasting notes with us?
I'm all ready for that. So we got, wow, smoked honey glazed ocean trout, barbecued on cedar planks next to crispy bit waffles, as we reminisce of a perfect day on a beach when we explored rock pools and caves on the sunset over the sea. We lit the tiki torches and the atmosphere turned electric. On the palate neat, it felt like a sweet, warm embrace. Flavors of bergamot, lavender oil, maple syrup, and molasses honey on dark chocolate chip muffins. Holy smoke. We all agreed it did not need water. However, an aroma of spicy, sweet cigar smoke mingled with the scent from firing a flintlock pistol while we tasted sweet, dark sea salt and smoky chocolate. A refill Oloroso butt, 19 years, distilled 2001.
That was your
James, I
note?
go first. So if this is a black label, Matt, is this then one of those vaults collection that I was talking about earlier?
No, I think this is just one of the premium, like they distinguish, there's the premium labels, which is black, and then the vaults is black, and they come with, you know, that little stripe, that little gold leaf stripe, you
And the
know,
box.
off and the box, yeah, and that
Box
that
is the
huge
vault.
box. Yeah.
It's quite funny. This whiskey reminds me. So in Scotland, there's a beach called Silver Sands. Now, Scotland not really has the, how should we say, weather for beach going, but on the rare occasion we do actually see sunshine and we don't run the opposite direction from it, screaming about that great big ball of fire in the sky. There's this place called Silver Sands, and talking about an evocative dram, this reminds me of, we took a family holiday up to Skye, and if you're going up to Silver Sands, you will going up to Skye, sorry, you will pass Silver Sands. And we had a barbecue on the beach, and the weather in Scotland, I'm sure as you're aware, can turn on a dime like that. And for me, what makes it quite interesting is this reminds me of that barbecue, and then that storm coming in and that big kind of salty, smoky note to it as well. And this again as well, I mean, I don't know if anyone else sees this, feels this with this one here, but this is really kind of especially when you compare it to the previous one with the color differential as well, is you can see what a first fill cask does to a whiskey. You know, the first fill does impart a heck of a lot of that color. But again, we're still playing with, I think it's a refill or Oloroso butt for this one. So, you know, just nosing this one compared to the previous one as well, there is that kind of slight change in flavor coming through.
Anyone else just like fighting with this one? Sort of, for me, I took that first sip, and even though it's only, I mean, it tastes a lot of 60 or higher stuff tonight, but even at 58, I'm getting a lot of ethanol on the palate. Anybody else fighting with it?
There is a definite kind of sort of spirity undertone to it as well. It's a wee bit just almost on the nose. And again, it sounds like a horrible way to describe a whiskey, but for me, it's a little bit gasoline-y. There's a wee bit, just a wee bit sort of, and I get this more with Glen Scotia sometimes personally, is that there's that kind of almost engine fumes, and there's that kind of little bit of rawness to it.
It does have a
At
diesel.
19 years old.
Yeah.
It's got a diesel note.
Diesel, yeah. Those wonderful Campbelltown Scotia notes.
I love that though. Sometimes it's like a machine oil, a little bit. I love that note though.
Have you ever gotten the chlorine note? I thought it was just me, but I read it more recently on another SMWS.
I got the dishwasher soap note before, but not that one.
So did I, and I thought it was actual dishwasher soap. But apparently it's a thing.
I definitely get the chocolate on the palate. Very like the dark chocolate.
Definitely, Matt. I also get that, for sure.
I think for me, what's kind of quite unique with this is, with Lefroy being kind of the only the distillery in the industry that uses the latest kind of first cut in the industry. So the kind of, when they're taking the heads, the tails, the hearts, this kind of brings out this kind of slightly almost medicinal aspect, and can kind of, for me, when I was small, I was always, when I was feeling unwell, it was a hot toddy with a jam of Lefroy thrown in as well for good measure. And this just reminds me of a day where I was unwell. My grandmother would make me a hot toddy, and just it kind of opens up everything and just kind of gets the air.
Fill in the blanks, however you describe it.
I blame
Like his
Brexit.
internet connection hears that he's having a good story.
I remember.
I think we all think you're doing it on purpose, Alan. When you get to the most exciting part of your story, like Paul is.
The internet is conspiring against me. But this is kind of, it's got that kind of raw medicinalness to it. And it's also got that really kind of hot toddy-esque kind of, you can imagine if you're thick with a cold, having this in a hot toddy, just to kind of, 19-year-old single cask Lefroy, I wouldn't be putting that into a hot toddy, personally speaking, but
I do get that feeling of medicine on the nose, which I'm glad, because that's one of my more favorite aspects of Lefroy.
Reminds me, I went to a steakhouse last night. This is like what I would want to drink with a steak.
I also love drinking peated whiskey with sticks, and I always the most best priced dram on the menu. Usually it's Lagavulin 16, you know, like everything is like 4 times like what you'd pay for it, but you know, you usually can get something peated and it just goes.
It's true.
You know, this was at,
That sounds like a future outing. Steakhouse and Pete, just throwing it out there.
this was at Keen's, and Keen's, you know, they have a really good Scotch menu there. Their Lagavulin, the only one they have there is I think it's the 11. I think that is that the Alferman.
Offerman,
So
yeah.
I bet you it's just very popular. Everyone wears Lagavulin at the steakhouse, so they're just sold out completely. They didn't have the 16 or anything.
Now I'm getting the iodine notes. I don't know why it was very muted for me in the beginning. I thought it was me, and then I don't know. Harold sneaked back to me, told me I should add what's it called, a little bit of water, and I guess it worked.
I got it without the water, which I was surprised. I haven't added water to any of mine, and this one, I'm getting more of that medicinal than I did on the others.
I love that note. I feel like there's like a sweetness at the end of it also. Maybe like it's like the iodine notes, then like maybe like morphs maybe a little bit into like cinnamon. It's really cool.
I agree with you, Brian. I do, yeah.
Well, and in addition to iodine, I get more of a like mercurochrome note.
I'm not enough of a chemist to know what that is. What is that?
If you're old enough, when you were little and you ran and you fell and scraped up your knee, your grandparents would put mercurochrome on it, and it basically had this like red dye. It's like betadine, and so
About to say, I feel like it turned everything brown.
they have brownish red, like rust color. Yeah, like you knew it wasn't you know, it was like this badge, like, oh crap, you know, idiot fell and scraped his knee.
I hear that.
I like this one a lot, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Was I did we were open Tuesday to Saturday, and we did a tasting on Saturday night at Glasgow, which is a black label tasting. So we do 5 different black label drams, and I used a Lafroig that was about the same age, and I think roughly similar casking as well, but again inherently so different.
That's the what's that one called again? I know the one you're talking about.
The Fancy Dan's Fabulous Drams.
No, it takes what is it? Now let us take a kind farewell. That was a 19-year-old also, refill ex Oloroso, but it looks exactly like the 10-year-old cask strength. There's no color to it whatsoever.
Gotta say, Contrawell was the most recent one. I had like those really big raspberry notes.
I don't know if it was that one.
See if I could find it.
Well, the 29.275 was also another one. That's all was ex Oloroso, the 20-year-old.
I'm gonna find the number in a second. I'm looking on the sample group.
I'd love to know what someone that just like listens into one of these conversations about all these different codes. Like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Batting averages and.
I'm thinking of Holy Smoke, 29.277. Is that what we're drinking now?
That's what we're drinking now. Yeah.
Doesn't taste anything like I remember it. I remember
I'm
being.
glad. I think I have 2 of these left after the one I sent to you, James.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I just think that the spectrum that we've been on with this tasting, that this is the 5th one, it's gonna taste different probably than, you know, like it's because like some of these are a little ashy, some of them were a little bit you know, sulfury, but I really like that. The 3rd one, the Divine Dark Temptation, I'm getting much more of the non-sherry Lafroig, like just classic notes on. So this one I think is gonna taste a lot different today than tomorrow or something else.
One of the just reminds me, see me with water, is what really kind of reminds me. There was a funny story I got told one time, and I don't know how much water you guys add to your whiskey, but whenever like I do a tasting in venue or anything, I always say the same thing. That's your whiskey. That's not my whiskey. I can't tell you how much water to add to it. You add as much or as little as you like. And when I said that, I was doing a tasting many years ago at Queen Street, and somebody pulled out a can of Coke and popped the Coke and dumped it into a 40-year-old Macallan that we were trying as well.
Excuse my language.
I had to be escorted from the room before I did something I would regret. But I was chatting to there was another guy I was chatting to, and I said, right, I'll ask you, how much water should I be adding to my whiskey? Because I get asked this all the time. And he said, oh, you should add a drop for every centimeter of copper piping in the distillery.
Sounds very complicated.
I'm like, okay, cool. Where can I find this information? Oh, you need to go to the distillery to find out. I'm like, well, no. So for me, it's like during my time at Queen Street, I've seen guys that do a glass full of water to the whiskey. I've seen guys do 50-50. It really is, and I can't stress this enough, the whiskey is open to interpretation, and especially with the society as well, is that we don't tend to take this kind of sort of overlord role of we know everything, we're whiskey experts. My personal opinion is you guys know your own palates. Palates are unique and different individual things. There's a company called Switty, which is SWRI, which is essentially the Scotch whiskey R&D development kind of sort of company. And when these guys are trying whiskeys, they'll do 50-50, a shot of whiskey to a shot of water. And to sit on the tasting panel, I had to sit a kind of, sort of nosing sort of exam where I had to sniff different pots and everything and come up with different flavors. And it's all subjective at the end of the day. And what the key thing is for me is that if you ever walk into a society venue, if you're unfortunate enough to have me roaming around behind the bar, I'm sure, as James will testify, I will start pulling things out of different cupboards in different areas. Whereas for me, I think it really is important where you guys know what you're drinking, you guys know what you're like. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to this, to be honest.
But I'll tell you a quick funny story. At my 35th birthday party, I had a couple of bottles open, and I turned around to notice one of my friends was mixing 35-year-old Talisker with Diet Pepsi, and I had a little bit of a problem with that.
Oh my!
And I was just like, whoa, no. This is not, well, I like it the way I like it. I'm like, not with this one. No, that's not happening.
James.
Or you pour them a nice dram and they throw it back like it's a tequila shot, and you're like,
yeah,
no, we're now switching you to the, you now get the cheap blended scotch.
Yeah.
Or you give them a Glencairn for the first time and they pour it themselves and they pour it to the top.
That I've never seen.
My mom did that once. I wanted to kill her. When my stepfather was ill, we had company over, and she grabbed the 24-year-old Highland Park from from Park Avenue, which is like one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. And she filled 2 Glencairns like all the way up. So there were only 3 of us. So I took the 3rd cup and poured, a third out of each of them. So we all had like, this big of a pour in a Glencairn. But, I'm like, well, Mom, that was about $1,000 worth of scotch. Thanks.
It's all good. Pour it to the top, put a straw in it. It's good. Well, we've got one more dram. So we've got a 6th dram. If you can't find it, go find it now. It has some question marks on it. We'll tell you what it is. While you're looking for that and pouring that, Alan, I had a question for you unrelated to that. You mentioned earlier about the casks. There's a story that we always hear about the society that there's 10,000 casks that are in maturation, and I always thought they were in Leith somewhere. So what is the story? Like, how many casks roughly does the society have? You mentioned there's another 10 years of whiskey they could have as outturns. How many casks do they have? Where are they? That, as much as you can share, I'm not going to quote you.
We have in excess of 10,000 at the moment. So they're all stored at our Hillingdon warehouse. So the casks used to be stored in Leith. And on the front of every society glass, every society bottle, you will see a building. That's our home. That's the vaults in Leith. And one of my favorite stories was I was chatting to a guy who used to work for the society many years ago. His name's Mark Davidson, and so he used to work at Leith a long time ago, and he heard this story from someone where you would walk into the vaults, which is what it's called down in Leith, and the floor would be covered in straw, and there would be casks all along the side of the building. There'd be no food served or anything. There was just casks racked all along the sides, and there was an honesty box system where there was a box hung over every cask, and you just put as much as you wanted into the cask, and you drew as much as you wanted from the cask to drink on the day as well. There was also sawdust all over the floor as well for the inevitable what would happen. At the moment, we have warehouses in America, which I think is just a bottle warehouse at the moment. It's a bottle warehouse in America. We've got a bottle warehouse in Germany. We've got a bottle warehouse in China as well, I believe. And also I think somewhere else as well, but I can't quite remember. But we do have most of our casks stored in Glasgow, just purely by virtue of we can't store that many casks in Leith anymore. So we have now retaken over the entire Leith Vaults venue as well. So we can actually, you can actually stay at the vaults as well. So we have the flats opened up now as well. So you used to be able to many years ago, and then we sold them on, and then we've now got them back again. But all of our casks are, and we don't use traditional dunnage, we use a racking system. And my favorite story about that was we went to the warehouse as a staff trip. The staff have only ever allowed to have gone once to the warehouse. And well, you put a load of whiskey geeks loose in a warehouse, then bad things are going to happen. And so we were let loose in the warehouse and we were running around all the racks, finding all the different casks and everything. And so we use a racking system where we'll stack them one on top of another. I think when we last went, we were about 15 high, 30 deep at the moment. And that was many, many years ago. And we've just started growing ever since. But also as well, we matured nothing off site. So everything is matured in our warehouse as well. And we've just purchased our new warehouse out in Uddingston as well. So that for me is a great thing because it's expanding again. And we're getting this whole new kind of sort of cask maturations, different oak strategies as well. And we are focused on wood management. So again, it's really interesting because there's we have different flexibilities and different abilities to kind of deal with casks and different casks that we store as well. So for me, that's what makes it really cool, is that we literally have that much casks to play with as well. So we do have about 10,000 casks in bond.
Did you know Mark when he was at Royal Mile?
He was my boss at Royal Mile.
Okay.
Yeah. So I used to work for a company called Royal Mile Whiskies. So I used to work there when Ian McClune and Sean McGlone were there. I used to run I don't know if you guys have ever been to Royal Mile Whiskies, but there's a cigar shop about 2 doors down. And the cigar shop is called the Cigar Box. So I used to run that for a while as well. And yeah, no, I used to know Mark quite well. And I still pop in from time to time if it's just to kind of brandish a society spirit and go, our stuff's better than yours. Ah.
Yeah, Mr. Green used to bring my Bonham's bottles over to Royal Mile. And then as long as I purchased enough stuff from Royal Mile, they would just send my Bonham's bottles with my Royal Mile bottles.
Oh, fantastic. No, because he came to us from Cadenheads, I believe. So he used to work for Cadenheads down the street in Edinburgh. And then he came to Royal Mile as well. Lovely guy, knows an insane amount. And the vaults used to be run by an ex-army general as well. And he would just sit in the corner, smoke his meerschaum pipe while everybody just drunk whiskey from the casks. So for me, it's one of these great things where, how the society was founded was Pip Hills jumping in his Ford Lagonda, driving up to Glenfarclas, buying a cask of Glenfarclas, driving back down to Leith and sharing out amongst his friends. And that for me is very intrinsically what whiskey should be about. And, it should be about, just sharing the wealth. And it's why some people may not like the secondary market, but I think it's a brilliant thing because it gets older whiskies out there. It gets people trying whiskies they may never have had before. So.
Right. I love the secondary. I feel like I get access to stuff I'd never be able to touch otherwise,
Great.
I agree. I don't like the prices lately, but
yeah, that's another
it is what it is.
I don't know what this 3 dram is, and I don't want to jump the gun, but I got like the craziest, like huge butterscotch note when I poured it, which I was like, what the heck is going on? Jim's is
we're right on schedule. We're about 2 hours and a little bit more, and it's been a good journey. I think every dram has been very different. This is the last one.
Yeah.
And Alan, I think you're going to read us the tasting notes before we tell you what it is.
So the alluring.
Whoops.
We'll start over.
maybe it's a mystery after all.
Mulligan. Okay, start over. There you
Alan,
go.
we think you did that on purpose. It's a mystery dram, and you said one word and then stopped.
The alluring color of orange toffee proceeded on to nose with aromas of caramel, fudge, and toffee apples. perhaps sprinkled with a light dusting of sea salt, soft smoke drifting in with the sea air and carried with it the impression of scallops, sweet crab meat, and lobster nets, tied with old nautical rope. Sea air became sea spray, dousing the remains of driftwood bonfires, scattering charcoal across the beach. Ginger and cloves were teasing with the idea of antiseptic antics, but veered backwards towards cinnamon spice with caramelized brown sugar, salted honeycomb crunch. The finish embraced the maritime, but with a lingering leapt of dark chocolate mousse.
Is this 234? Yeah, there you go. I thought so.
Matt, you're one of a kind. I'm gonna Google it.
James,
right.
you're on mute.
That's right, and my apologies. I wish there was more of this. This is all. This is the rest of it. So everyone got almost half an ounce, and this is my favorite Lafroig, and this was one of the first from the first Vaults collection, and it is smoked and salted toffee apple. As you got it. So this is one of those that another unicorn that's out there, but. This is 27-year. I think I put the details there, but another ex Oloroso. I think there was a finish. I think there was a finish on this, but I'm not really sure. No. So this was fully matured.
This was fully matured, I believe. Yeah.
Can be viewed on Matt Ryan's Instagram page if you want to know what it looks like. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even guess this was Lafroy from the nose.
I just got one of these recently. Yeah.
So whose is this, James? Who do we have to thank for?
No, this is
James.
mine. This is mine.
James.
This is
All right,
one
cheers,
that
Matt.
I've been holding for this tasting for quite a while. So yeah, everyone's Slanjava. It's been 6 good drams now, and this is. And I asked Alan, I was like, should we start off with this one? It's 54 some percent, so maybe it's a little lower. But he's like, no, save it to the end. It's going to be a good journey through all these different drams. And again, this is another one of those that I mentioned earlier. You just don't know if you ever taste it again. And every time I taste it, that's the same thing. It's like, I don't know the next time I'll ever taste this if I ever do again. It is a very special whiskey.
Yeah. Very good.
So we released this at the same time as a Macallan and a Rosebank. And I remember this was still fairly new into my tenure with the society. And my then sort of manager at the time was saying, right, well, pulled the bottle up, popped it on the bar, and he said, oh yeah, here, try this. Boom. Poured a tiny wee bit into a glass and let me try it. I was like, what is it? It's a 27-year-old Lafroig. And I was kind of sitting there going, like, wow. And for me, that's what's always so great about the society. And if you visit any of the branches, we're always so keen to share what we have behind the bar. And of course, if you ever visit Glasgow, I guarantee you I'll find some treasures hiding about the bar in Glasgow as well. But this for me is just sheer memories.
Is the bar open on Sundays?
Unfortunately not. Queen Street is though, but we're not open on Sundays. Not at the moment anyway.
No, when I come back from Face, I was trying to figure out what to do on Sunday or if I was going home. So
This one is fantastic. It really is fantastic.
Very beautiful whiskey. Very muted peat notes. No.
Very soft, definitely. I feel like some of these. I got this from another one of the 98s I tasted last night. I forgot which one it was, but it was. You almost get like a space side, sort of like a peated space side note. It's such a sweet, just honeyed whiskey. It's delicious. This is just classic. Really nice.
Since you mentioned peated Speyside, I don't know how many here have actually tried, but like Balakin, I think, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Balanchin, yeah, Balanchin.
Yeah, Balanchin. Those finished in sherry casks or matured in sherry casks are fantastic as well. Highland peat. It's like completely different, but like like a long lost cousin, if you will. But
There's a new one.
it's
There's a new one coming out from Whiskey Sponge for the Knights of Edward Hour group. So if you're not a member, you
okay.
may want to sign up. It's going to be, I think it's what is it, 11 years or something like that. And
It came out already. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
they
I
just
think it
announced
did
it
come out.
yesterday. Yeah.
No, it came out. It's
Oh,
released.
it came out.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
signed up for
On
it.
Friday, I think it was released.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hefty
No,
price
there's no
tag.
one for the club, not just the one that they did. There's another one that's coming out as single cast just for the club.
I thought it was
think
released.
that's right.
Okay.
There's two of them. There's one that came out last week, and there's like, I don't know if it's a sister cast, but it's a similar age that's just for this one group.
I just remember because the label had a very medieval theme to it from this past week. But
Or
you'll be right, definitely.
So
I don't read everything.
Hey,
The
Alan, how's-
Whiskey Exchange had two good ones, two very good sherry ones. One from I think 2 or 3 years ago, and one from last year. That was really fantastic.
you talking about the
There is
whiskey,
one too. Haven't
Matt.
tried it yet.
whiskey exchange one?
Yeah, they had two sherry. They just released an 18-year-old, but it's all bourbon. I haven't gotten that one yet, but they released. I don't remember the ages. I'd have to look, but they were full sherry casks and they were fantastic.
The 15 I remember loving.
Yes, I could find it. I'm sure.
Alan, I was going to ask you, I haven't seen any Port Charlottes in a very long time.
So I think the last Port Charlotte we did was Cantina Mexicana. I think
That was for the festival with the Day of the Dead face on it.
But
I think that's-
I actually just saw on TTB there's supposed to be it's under the 23. It's 23.78, a smoky sea dog. It's a 10-year-old, but that's under the Brookladdick number, which is 23, I believe.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's supposed to come out soon. It's a 10-year-old, yeah, heavily peated.
So I don't think we'll be doing any Port Charlotte at the moment. Saying that, we've just done Ardnamurchan.
That's it, Harold. Yeah.
So we've just done Ardnamurchan. So we've done, I would say, Port Charlotte. I don't think, in all honesty, we'll be seeing anything anytime soon. If we do see a Port Charlotte, because Port Charlotte are not actively distilling as a separate entity, then I don't think we will. But at the same time, never say never, because one of the interesting things with the society is, of course, every distillery has its own number. But if you look up the Loch Lomond malts, Loch Lomond has about 5 different numbers because they've got about 5 different stills.
Yep.
And this again is why we might see Port Charlotte, but it's also a reason why we might see a Rosebank come back to the society, because the Rosebank Vaults collection that was released about the same time as this was the Rosebank was touted as the last ever Rosebank you will see in the society. So I would say yes and no for the Port Charlottes more than anything else. We might see them, we might not. I don't know off the top of my head. But I hope we will, because I remember trying the Cantina Mexicana and just being absolutely blown away with it, because I bought just the standard Brookladdick Port Charlotte many years ago, and I was absolutely blown away with different complexities off the malt. And this for me is why I'm always a big fan of the different Islay styles, because if I was to try the kind of proprietary versions of these things, I would be kind of, right, okay, just give me a Lafroig because that's what I like. Whereas because of the cask strength, it's like the higher ABV, I don't add water to my whiskies. So, I tend to like that big, bold flavor. I tend to like the big tastes as well. And this for me is what makes it really interesting and cool to play around with. I hope we will see Port Charlotte. I was thoroughly impressed with Cantina Mexicana, but I really want to see it again. But who knows is the honest answer. And at auction, the prices for Port Charlottes by the society are getting rather insane at the moment as well, I would say.
What about Kilchoman? I know you mentioned it before, but I remember someone telling me that they really don't give out a lot of casks to independent bottlers.
So Kilchoman's much like Balvenie, where we just don't get a lot of casks. I think I heard, I don't know if there's any truth to this, but there's about 1 cask of Balvenie per year that goes up to auction. But with Kilchoman, We have done it in the past. We have done a lot of them in the past, but I think there was a fire at the warehouse or something. So this is what's making it very difficult for like Bruichladdich, Kilcoman, for us to get casks from them, because they're buying a lot of casks back. So they're contacting a lot of guys that have private casks with them, going, we will give you X amount to get the cask back as well. So I think we will probably see something. We just don't know when we'll see it more than anything else. Lagavulin, I honestly don't think we'll see a Lagavulin anytime soon. Lagavulin being number 111. We won't see Lagavulin for a long time, just because there's just so much brand behind the Lagavulin. But Kilcoman, I would like to see something come back from them. I was fortunate enough to try a Kilcoman from a society member in Germany many years ago at Queen Street, and it was just so different from your standard malt. It was just absolutely fantastic. It really kind of developed and grew in the palate, and it tasted like a young Lafroig. It had that really big kind of heavy peat to it. And again, but I mean, going with Lafroigs from tonight, it just shows you, and it sounds rather naff, but it's one of the reasons why I enjoy my job, is that no two whiskies are the same. Each month we do different releases. So each month you may buy a 29 one month and then buy 29 the next month, and then both being incredibly different and unique, and just, I mean, it makes staff training a bit of an issue of having to kind of bring everybody through the whiskies and try out the whiskies and making sure everything's okay. But, you know, somebody has to do it, I guess.
Hey, Alan, if you have any, you were saying that the society might be looking at the bodegas about sourcing sherry butts directly. So just a thought, and the rest of you guys, you guys get around. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I thought this was cool. And just an idea, if you guys do, if the society does get like sherry butts. So I was able to get this bottling, which I don't know, I'll see if I can get it close enough. Basically, La Maison de Whiskey, it was done by Signatory. So it's a Lafroig that was matured in it's Maury, which is some kind of like dessert wine. And so basically you got a 500 ml bottle of Lafroig, which is 7 years old, matured in a refill butt, and then finished 11 months in this like Maury butt. And I'll see if I can find it on Whiskey Base and give you the ID number. But what's cool is that they give you also get a bottle of the wine that's matured in, the dessert wine.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So, you know, I thought that was like really cool. So
I know certainly we have purchased a full Solera system from the House of Ximenez Spinola, and that's who we're looking with at the moment. Though I know we are talking about, so we are talking about different cask finishes as well. So we did one of our blended projects called Pomegranate Germalata that was finished in, excuse pronunciation, Chicopee oak, which is American swamp oak essentially. So we've done that as well. And this is what I kind of like about it, is the fact that we're not hemmed in with producing distillery specific traditional styles. So, for example, all of our Glenfarclases, with the exception of about 2 or 3, have not even a lick of sherry in them. It's all bourbon. Whereas if you were to go to the Glenfarclas distillery and ask for a cask strength single cask bourbon cask, they'll look at you funny and tell you what you do. No, we do sherry casks. So this is why you get all these different styles, and especially with the Lafroigs that we tried tonight as well. I keep harping on about it, but it's these kind of really interesting styles and flavors. And also as well, these casks will have spent a certain amount of time at the warehouses from Lafroig, but we will have taken them away from the warehouse at a certain time. And what I always say is that we purchased the cask at age X and we mature till age Y. X and Y being huge variables. They will change from distillery to distillery, cask to cask even as well. And even the finishing process will change rapidly as well. And this is one of the reasons why I love the kind of sort of single cask nature, is the flavors will change and develop and kind of grow and alter as well. So it makes the job challenging, but also makes the job quite fun at the same time, I guess.
I'll put in the note, I found it. This is Whiskey Base 5919.
Well, this is the point of the night where we'd love to hear what everybody thinks about their favorite. And we've had 6 different ones. They've kind of been all over the place, really. I mean, there's um, we started off with a 9 year, and then 14, 17, 2 19s, and then a 27. But if everyone's willing, we'll go around. You can say pass two if you don't want to share. But yeah, let's hear what you think about the favorite of the night and see how you fit in terms of what everyone's favorites. And ladies first, Amanda, would you be willing to share first? What was the one that stood out to you the most out of these 6?
Okay. I mean, the last one obviously was extremely good. I liked the 29.158 and 29.277 a lot, judging by my notes. So yeah.
That was really good. Harold.
Yeah, so this is my issue with like the SMWS stuff because I have to essentially just remember numbers.
Okay,
I'm really
pass.
bad at that.
Okay, not joking.
I'm bad with math. Leave me alone. Whichever one I said was the dark and stormy. I don't know if that was the Sherry Bomb one of the night or if it was the one after or before it. But whatever that one was, that was my favorite.
It was the one before it.
So 190?
Yeah.
That's what I was looking at. Yeah.
Yeah. 190.
Yeah. That one just, like I said, it developed. It was very complex on the palate, and a lot of these other ones, like I felt like there was a lot of difference between them, but there was also a very thin, salinic, oily note with a lot of them. And like I said, the past 2 nights, I actually went back and I had a wonderful sample selection of like 98 Lafroig's. Signatory Vintage put out really good stuff a few years ago that I was able to collect a few samples of and put together a really nice just sort of background notes on what I'd be sampling today. And it was interesting, the barbecue ham note definitely stands out with Lafroig. I know everybody gets their own differences, but for me, I got a lot of that with it. With one of them in particular, I got like it was a refill sherry, but I got a lot of the tropical notes that you got with the older Lafroigs. I didn't get any of the tropical stuff with these tastings, with the oldest being 19 years, so maybe above 20 you sort of get those notes, or it depends on the vintages. I don't know. But overall, I felt like I got a very similar roasted barbecue note, potato chip note on a lot of them, and it was just a really fantastic tasting. Like I said, I got that similar note, but then each pour had their own slight difference from it. Just a wonderful Lagavulin tasting, James.
Yeah, it's kind of like Top
Lagavulin?
Inside joke. Inside joke.
Inside joke.
Yeah, I remember that. This is like Top Chef, where you had to make like a nice like fruitcake dessert, but you had this one ingredient, and I think that one ingredient shines through each of these, but it does taste very different along the way. Will Hernandez, we haven't heard much from you. Thanks for joining us on West Coast Hours. What did you think so far? Were you drinking all the drams with us? I assume you were.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I've been drinking all of them. I'm already feeling it since I've had like a pancake for breakfast before all of this. I mean, for me, the easy answer would be that last one, but outside of that, I think it's for me, it's a choice between 260 and actually 88. I actually loved the 9-year.
Yeah, the 9-year carried such really good characteristic of the distillery.
Yeah.
Awesome. Richard.
Yeah, I'm going to be boring and go for the last one as well. For me, we didn't talk much about it, but I actually thought the nose, for me, it had a hint of the medicinal that I didn't get so much on the others, but which you would associate with Lafroig. But then the toffee and caramel flavors were just spectacular. So I'm going with the popular favorite.
Well put. Well put. Matt Ryan.
I'm going to skip the 234 because I won't, that's just, I think, on its own level. But the 158 and the 277, I think, were my favorites. and I would give the edge to the 158, I think, because I just finished off the sample, and I just feel it was, I don't know, it was just very heavy. I like my Lafroigs very heavy-handed. I like a sledgehammer in the mouth. I don't like them soft. I don't like them easygoing, and I felt it was the most raw hitting one of them all, in my opinion.
Awesome.
So-
Yeah, now we're kind of like we're picking camps now because those are the two that were a little bit more of that they're a little more dirty, I should say. I don't know if that's the right way to put
I
it.
like
No
it dirty.
surprise. No surprise he likes the heavy, smoky, tarry notes from
Yep.
number 2. Definitely.
And Tomo, what did you think?
Uh,
I think you guys
think I like number 3, the
3 190.
190, my favorite. But like me and James was little chat about it doesn't super taste like a heavy sherry.
Yeah.
So then, as or the Matthew Moon mentioned it, they don't really use the sherry cask. They most likely focus on the American oak, and then that kind of makes sense because that's more like a Lafroy to me. So,
Yeah, hopefully you guys could hear all that because he's talking to my microphone over here. But
yeah.
the 190, because it didn't have as much sherry influence and had a lot more Lafroy character, which I agree with too. Going back to it like after the other heavy sherry ones, which was the 260, going back to the 190, I didn't nose any sherry afterwards. It was like completely gone at that point. Like my nose senses were all gone. Matt Lauren.
I was a fan of one, other than the last one, I was a fan of the 190 as well. You know, for the reasons that were just said. I mean, I thought it was just a classic Lafroig, and just enjoyed it. So, and then my next would be the number 4 if I had to choose another one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was really good. Bill Myers. What's that, Matt?
No, they were all great. I mean, really, in a way. So,
Bill Myers, what did you think?
Probably the 277, the Holy Smoke. But I do also tend to like the really heavy ones. In fact, I wonder if Ryan's tried the 2968 or 2964. One of them is called the Diesel Fishing Boats and Engine Smoke, and the other one, I think the notes are still up on the shelf, but I'm sure it's on whiskey based. But those are both those were my introduction to like heavy Lafroigs, because I bought them and I poured it and I was like, oh, this is horrible. And then after I finished my dram, I'm like, I should probably give it another chance. Didn't really give it a full chance. And so I kept pouring more. And then at some point I'm like, I think I really like this. So yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, Bahash is right also that I was at a party where one of my friends who goes to Scotland a lot, and she loves Isla malts, and there was this one Society Lafroig that was just it was the Lafroig equivalent of the Lagavulin 12s, where it's like cast strength and just a lot of smoke and not much else. And so she had to kill that bottle night, and it was one of the few bottles that was pretty full on the table. And so she told me just make her something because she was busy entertaining. And I mixed some of that with some Abelor Arbona. And when I gave it to her, she was shocked. She's like, "This isn't on the table. I know I wouldn't put this on the table." And so I told her I did. It was amazing.
Like I told you, Lagavulin 12 or Lafroig in Caston, you mix it with like Abelor Arbona. It's like it takes it to a totally different plane of existence.
Yep.
Most of the big peated guys really love that, like elusive, like really, really good versions of the smoky sherry. I feel like everyone's always looking for that,
Brian, I'm going to leave you last because I know you joined late, so I know you're probably catching up.
Right.
Peter, what'd you think?
I feel this is a house divided. I like my speed dial down, so I'm gonna go opposite of what Matt Ryan felt like, and I'm gonna go with 260 as my number 1. And then actually, Will Hernandez said it right. I also like the very first one, 88. And I mean, obviously, Matt, thanks for the 234. It was absolutely fantastic, but it's its own category perhaps. So I think my number 3 would then be 190.
Yep. Yep. That's fair. Prashant.
For me, I think it was a bit of an easier choice than most other people, I would imagine. For me, 1, 2, 4 in the lineup stood out. So 29.88, 29.158, and 29.260. Those were the ones that stood out to me. And I loved all 6, but like those 3 were like my favorites among the 6. If I had to pick just one out of the entire 6 grams, I think it would be 29.260.
Nice. All right. Brian, what did you think?
So I still did not try 29.158 and 20.88.
Disqualified.
I started a little bit late. I'm sorry about that. 29.260 I thought was just a little too tannic for me. I saw why other people liked it, but like my original favorite was going to be 29.277 just because of how much more I liked it than from the last time I tried it. The last time I tried it, I thought it was like this big, like, smoky raspberry bomb. And this time I found it like so much more, like almost, I understand that it's a sherry cask, but I feel like I was getting like what I associate with bourbon cask Lafroig notes. But then I just poured 29.190, and I think that that's the winner for me. But I feel like there's a little bit of nostalgia in there also, just like random. My buddy Akiva, who I feel like some people here know, gave me a while back. He told me, if you want to try a Lafroig that doesn't have iodine notes and it's just very pure Lafroig, and that's what this.
But that's like Lafroig without Lafroig.
No, but I'm telling you, that's what this reminds me of just a little bit. It was like this Binny's pick from like the early 2000s, and he really liked it, so he had like 30 bottles of it in his basement. It was a very like him specifically type of guy. I actually would assume that if Bill Myers would start digging in his basement, he would have some of it also. He's just that kind of guy also.
You know what number it is?
Oh yeah, Bill has everything.
I sure have pictures of that cask number. It was an 18-year-old Binny's pick, I think. But this reminds me of that, and I love that bottle. And it was like a, like a one-shot deal with that. And this reminds me of that. It's like very, very pure Lafroig without so much of the iodine.
I don't know if you guys actually have tried it, but this is not an SMWS bottling, but it is a Lafroig bottling by Douglas Ling under the XOP label. There's a 26-year-old that was like a sherry cask version of it. I think there was a 25-year-old, but there were like 2 versions of it. One was an ex-bourbon cask, one was a
26
sherry
was
cask.
sherry.
Yeah, the 26-year sherry was absolutely freaking exquisite. It
I have
reminded
that
me.
one.
I did get this, but I haven't tried it.
No, not that one. I'm talking about the Douglas Ling XOP.
Yeah, there's a direct. Oh, never mind.
It was a nice.
XOP, the extra old particular. That one, I bought a bottle, finished it, and I have been in search of a replacement bottle for like 4.5 years.
Check the Whiskey Vault. I think he has one. The whiskeyvault.com. He has that one in stock, I think.
Okay, I'll check it out. But yeah, that one was exquisite. It reminded me of the older Lafroig 30s, and it was probably maybe better even, at least from memory.
Olaf just disappeared. I'll ask him to share. I know he was lightly tasting and nosing. So my favorite was actually the 260. Matt Ryan, I disagree with you a little bit. It was it was just too unique, you know, it's just too unique. And there's a history there, and there's like you can kind of taste the original and then the new, and it's all about, I always see it's like experimentation, but it's like, where does Lefroy go in the future? It's like down that alley. Like that's where my head goes. I think the best nose though was the first one, which was called "What a Magnificent Handsome Nose." I'm still nosing that one. I think that one was the best nose out of all of them actually, which is kind of interesting. Olaf's gonna go. So then, lastly, but not least, Alan. So if you would be willing, share with us what you thought about all the drams in terms of what your favorite was, and if you have any final words for us to kind of send us off. And afterwards, we can sit around and drink, and everyone can have fun. But please share with us, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. I unfortunately have stock take tomorrow, so I've got to go through and count all the drams in the venue, so it should be good fun. For me, personally speaking, I would say my two absolute favorites for tonight was the 29.88 and 29.158 for the sheer reason that that was the first time I've ever tried these malts. I've tried everything. I've tried the other ones there as well, and they were all great malts and great expressions. But the 88 and the 158 is the reasons why I love doing this kind of stuff is that it's a chance to try different things. And for me, I think the day I get bored with whiskey, the day I get bored with the society spirit is the day I'm hanging up my heels and I'm hanging up my waistcoat. I'm done.
Is that the day you start drinking vodka, Alan?
Who knows? Vodka and gin all the way. But for me, I think really kind of to pick a favorite out of these 6 drams that we tried tonight, I think I personally couldn't, because each of these 6 drams has their own character, their own flavor, their own kind of style as well. And they're all really kind of quintessential, for me, quintessential expressions as to why I've got involved with the company, why I've stuck with the company as well. And it's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this kind of stuff is that it's got this different style, different flavor, a different approach to things. And while the other IBs are good at what they do, they tell you what you're drinking. We don't. So you'll know the numbers and everything, but at the same time, you've got different flavors coming through. And what I find phenomenally interesting is that it's single cask. You've got all these different cask finishes, these different cask styles as well. And in all honesty, I know I've got a heck of a lot of colleagues that are going to be very jealous when I tell them what I've tried. So what I'll do as well is I'll just pop again my Instagram handle thing. Sorry, I'm not very good with social media, and my work email as well. So if you've got any questions, queries, or if you've got any questions about stock or anything, just let us know. Or if you're coming through to Glasgow, just chuck me an email, then we can see what we can do about getting you booked in and everything else like that as well, when the world goes back to the new normal, of course. So if you've got any questions or queries or anything like that, please do send me an email. I'll see what I can do to help in the best way I can as well. And yeah, I guess like before I leave you guys, really the sort of last thing I can say is, once again, thank you very much, guys, for sharing some pieces of society history with me that I thought I'd never try again. The 29-190 is perhaps one of the first sort of proper Lefroigs that I tried. The 0.88, the 0.158 are something I've never had before. The other two as well, the 280 and 277, 216 and 277. You know, classic examples of just high-end, really interesting Lefroigs. And for me, you know, but see, I've still got a wee bit left in my bottles as well. And I will be saving these because I will probably sit down with my dad tomorrow and try these with him as well, because that was my first introduction to Lefroy, was Lefroy quarter cask. And that was sitting with him in front of a fire. And that for me is what's quite important, is that whiskey is all about connections. It's all about memories. It's all about being an evocative experience. And I may be bragging tomorrow to my work colleagues about all the pretty shiny things that I've tried here tonight as well. But what I would say as well is, once again, yeah, thank you for all the bottles out of the collections and everything else like that as well. If you've got any questions, any queries, even if you're not a member of the society, drop me an email. I'm always more than happy to help. Any questions, just fire me an email. I'll see what I can do to help as well. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, for a really interesting and fun night and my day off work. But yeah, it's not been a bad day off for me, I would say.
I told you it would have been so formal if you didn't dress up, but now that you dressed up, it was a very formal affair. No, thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody. Thank
James,
you,
you have a
Matt.
Lefroy t-shirt too.
Thank you, everybody.
No, thank you, Matt and Olaf, for the bottles. We're gonna stay on, so if anyone wants to ask any other questions, you guys can drop off as you want. But thank you guys for producing the bottles to make this happen, and thank you, Alan, again. Alan's just a cool guy to sit down and have a dram or a pint with. So just keep that in mind. If you see him in Glasgow, he's
Yeah,
a cool
definitely.
dude that you could sit down and have a drink. He's not one of these guys that drinks whiskey and afterwards he's like, no, I don't drink whiskey really. I drink wine. You know, like he's like a whiskey nut, cigar nut. And Alan, next time you're in the States, let us know. We'll do a special event with you as well.
Definitely, 100%. Anything I can do to help, I'm always more than happy to muck in, of course. And it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you guys as well. I've got to go off and get some kip now because I've got to commute back to Glasgow tomorrow. So have a good night, and I hope you guys have a lovely evening. And I hope you guys enjoy the drams. And thank you very much for listening to me talk absolute rambling for however long it's been, to be honest. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you guys have a lovely night and enjoy the rest of your day. See you later.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much.